Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Fanfiction podcast. I'm so excited to have you here. Today, we're diving into a brand new story, True Terror, in the world of heroism part 13 by HYPN0S. Before we jump in, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you think. Chapter summary: follow a small intermission as heroes and villains prepare for the next strokes that they will lead on, all while the shadow of the traitor looms over all and some unlikely people realize how deep the rabbit hole goes. Also, Melissa breaks a phone and Toru gets face-hugged. Chapter notes: guess who got himself a Series X? This guy. You can blame Microsoft for the delay. Also, my brain dried up. Hello all, this is HYPN0S. Back with a new chapter of Hack 2, which should have been finished a month ago, but like I said, my brain dried up. I got my Series X 2 weeks ago and have been enjoying overclocked games that are obviously meant not to be run by such hardware, but here we are. There is also a practical reason as to why I waited this long to publish. I wanted to see how the fights of Darby and Toga went up, and they kinda went as I expected and disappointed me. On Darby's side, he seemed unstoppable. Like shit, I really expected Endeavor to pull something from Saint Seiya and pretty much fly with Darby towards space and blow up there, because I didn't see that fight ending up with any of them surviving at all. Mostly Darby, because he was committed to becoming a thermobaric bomb and kill everything around him. That's how crazy he was. But again, this is shonen, and unless explicitly shows in the first chapters, then you can count on something happening and saving the day. Which in this case were the Todorokis pretty much showing up to cool Darby's ass off, and Aidia being the strangest missile to deliver Shoto to end it. As for Toga, well, I am kinda seeing some theme in how the league is falling down. In the case of Spinner was a fanatical madness that at the end runs its course and leaves everyone feeling drained, like in The Purge. Darby is akin to the fears of a bomb, or an atomic one ending it all. Toga is the grey goo, another apocalyptic event that ends up after Okako floats everyone, and gets stabbed for her problems, but gets saved by Toga by doing what Twice did for her, giving her her cloned blood, all of it. That one is bittersweet, as Toga, unlike Darby, is a victim of circumstances. She is a monster made by the people around her, not by herself, and after holding up for so much just shattered hard and no one was there to pick the pieces and see if something was salvageable. In the end, the question of who's to blame for the monster is answered. In this case, the people around her, who gave her no other option but to slowly break. Now I see Shigaraki suffering another apocalyptic end, an evolutionary endpoint. Maybe his body was made to handle AFO at full tilt, but can it handle AFO while getting pummeled by OFA, while waging a psychological war against the psyche of the man itself while Deku tries to reach him? At the end, something has to give, and no amount of evolution in the body can hope to handle so much in such a short amount of time. Now that I am done with my small rant, let's get this show on the road, shall we? See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter 9, Hollow Knight, UA. Nedzu priced himself for being able to plan for the unexpected, as high specs pretty much gave him an edge over criminals and masterminds that think they can get one on him. Apparently, high specs didn't account for one Izuku Midoriya breaking out his new power in unexpected ways and handing them intelligence. Somehow he was able to infiltrate his mind into one of the villains that had attacked them and confirmed many of his fears. Many of Yagi's fears too, once informed. The League of Villains seemed to have a shadow backer, the true mastermind behind the organization, someone who Shigaraki called sensei with reverence. It confirmed Eshido's statement before. All for One was alive, for some godforsaken reason. Somehow, he survived having his head caved in and had spent the last 5 years making everyone believe it was over. It was not, and he had been making moves, grooming an heir, planning his takeover of Japan, because the man was crazy enough to think that taking over a country won't spur the other nations to action and drop everything onto him, onto Japan. Nedzu wasn't a fool. He knew there were people who were eager for Japan to fuck up and intervene in the sake of freedom, but he knew better. Everyone did. Another conflict was just around the corner, rubbing its grubby paws, and all it would take was for one mistake. Young Midoriya's action had pretty much ensured that they wouldn't get caught with their pants down, an occurrence that he was actually getting tired of. Also, he confirmed many, many more things. Jackal was a name not spoken lightly in the underground, an assassin that was also quirkless, under AFO employment. It was both concerning and strange, to be honest, considering the stories regarding AFO rewarding his followers with quirks. Another attack on UA. Now they had the means for a counter, considering what they were planning. Bombing his school. Oh, he is going to enjoy tearing their organization apart piece by piece. The fact this Shigaraki would send Toga in 2 weeks to hunt down Stain was strange. He saw the reasoning behind it, using Stain's image to lure more acolytes to the League's side, no one realizing that Stain is in fact Toga wearing his face. It was a simple, yet inspired plan that depended more on Toga doing her job rather than actual planning. It also depended heavily on Toga actually out-stealth Stain, which, okay, that was having a lot of faith in that girl if he was being honest. But considering the after-action reports he got from Midoriya-kun regarding her being a low-rent kappa, being able to use several quirks aside from the blood claws initially reported by Uraraka-kun, Shield-kun, and Koda-kun. That alone presented a problem as he was the only one to confirm the usage of multiple quirks, and his quirk being affected by one, meaning he was the only one capable of combating Toga safely due to his own amount of powers, not quirks, got to stress that when Kaina joins the staff. However, this opened a window of opportunity they didn't have before. With the information forwarded by Midoriya, they had now a plan of defense, future actions of the League, their main collaborators and true leadership, and most importantly the traitor. If played right, they could use this to weed him or her out, instantly cutting any lines of information AFOI might have on them, feeding in the League a sense of paranoia that maybe, just maybe, someone had betrayed them. However, that could easily backfire, as he did not know the true motivation behind the traitor's actions. For all he knew, the traitor had done what he or she had done because there was no other choice, family endangered being the most prominent on his mind. Running calculations on his mind, he came to the chilling conclusion it was that, and it was a vague threat backed by AFO's own status as a monster of the underworld. All he had to do was present himself to them and say, "You work for me. Oh, by the way, my name is AFO. If you don't obey, well, I'll let you imagine it." It was enough for many, considering the man had done to many for so long that he didn't need to keep the family of the traitor kidnapped. Just the vague threat of death hanging about was enough. That alone changed everything. If he revealed that they knew about their little mole, then who knew what AFO and the League would do? He could feed them false info. Feed them highly curated info. It was obvious they were after All Might. If he attached All Might directly to one class and ensure that class was in the crosshairs of the League, he can narrow down the traitor immediately by sheer probability alone. But that meant putting a class of students, his students, into direct danger. It went against everything that he preached. UA was here to teach and protect, not this. However, the clinical part of his head, the one high specs fueled, reminded him that there were no triumphs without sacrifices. This was just one more to ensure a monster was down for the count. Unless Nedzu began to plan, Izuku's new power, Strand had already shown its worth by being able to send Izuku's consciousness directly onto someone. How it happened, it didn't matter. Only that now he could enter three minds. Melissa Shield's own, which he fled almost immediately due to friendship and awkwardness. The villain child, Gadget, whose connection seemed to be the weakest of the three and fraying as time went on, so it was an unreliable one. Then the last, Toga's own. This implied that either you had to touch one of the strands Midoriya generated for a connection to form, or in the case of Melissa, have a quirk as strange as one for all actually interacting with Strand for a connection to form, being permitted by the vestiges within. And Toga had been at the epicenter when Strand first manifested, so her connection must be the sturdiest right now. Yes, it could work, but he would have to run this plan with the rest before he can make it happen. This is the kind of plan that require all hands on deck and a lot of morality chains yanking about to stop him from going over the edge. He knew the others wouldn't like it. After all, they were here to teach the next generation, not start planning the downfall of a would-be demon lord and his cohorts. But at this moment it didn't matter. Whether they wanted it or not, they were at war with all for one, so it was high time to start working on taking out his command one by one. 2 days later, classes had returned in full force after the 3-day recess. There were, of course, rumors regarding the 3-day recess running about the academy. Everyone knew it had been because of the USJ attack, but only Class 1A knew the full extent of the attack and the ones involved in it, and the reasoning behind the 3-day recess. As Melissa and Momo had theorized, it was because of the troops' own ability for teleportation. Their tech was advanced enough that it didn't cause spatial anomalies that Uraraka or Izuku could feel, unlike the one teleporter of the League, who they did feel when he used his quirk. That alone could cause alarm in anyone in the world, as there is a defense mechanism for teleporters like the League's own villain, but the troops' own tech seemed to laugh in the face of that and openly mocked everyone with its inability to be blocked, which led to the announcement of the school festival cancellation. They didn't like it, Aizawa said as he lay on a sofa, still cocooned in his sleeping bag and trying to get some ZZZ as usual. Of course, they didn't, Vlad King snapped. The festival is a way for the kids to promote themselves for the pros, and it happens only once every year. Cancel it is pretty much a sure way to torpedo their careers even before it even begins, he added. Okay, then what do you suggest? Nemurai asked. Because this is a technical issue, and if the eggheads back in Island haven't found a way to prevent the troop to teleport shit, then we haven't either, she added with a frown. And the only two people that can feel any change can't feel that shit triggering. Yagi just remained quiet, looking at Nedzu, who had an unreadable expression on his face. Principal, something occurred, he asked. Yes, Yagi-kun. 2 days ago Midoriya-kun approached me after he had a breakthrough with a new aspect of his quirk, which he calls Strand Another. Knuckle Duster asked. That kid is pulling powers out of his ass like a magician pulling out cards, an unfortunate or fortunate side effect of his encounter with Himiko Toga and the effects on his quirk, but what matters is what he discovered with it. During meditation, he discovered he had a connection with the villain's mind, two in fact, Toga's own and a technician of theirs, a child called Gadget that seemed to quiet the teachers there. During this meditation, he was able to discern several things, chief among them that there is in fact a traitor on the ranks of the students. A quiet fuck of present MIC was enough of an answer for everyone in the room. Most importantly, he found out the identity of the true leader of the league and their next steps. All for One is sponsoring this league and has nurtured an heir. Now Yagi had stood up, the early words of Mina now being confirmed by a second source. The fucker Knuckle Duster hissed with hate. What else he found out? The league is planning a series of attacks on UA in a 3-week time period. A distraction, mind you, as it seems that Hashima Island holds secrets Tidal was very privy to and died trying to air them out. That sobered everyone out. It is one of the reasons I cancelled the sports festival, never mind the troop and their teleporting technology, but the league is the more tangible threat out of the two, and out of the two who is seeking advantages, Nedzu replied. Like? Gran Torino wondered. The same thing we are looking for, technological advancement the troop has achieved on the blood of innocence, Nedzu replied. Midoriya says that the league believes this is where the metal gears were constructed and the mobile base doubled also as a transport unit towards the coastal bases in Japan and the rest of Asia if needed, Nedzu replied. So, what now? Aizawa asked. Aside from keeping Midoriya under watch because that connection might be used against him, he said. Doubtful. I highly doubt even the Demon Lord himself can hope to contest against something that Midoriya-kun believes is the string theory manifest. In fact, I highly believe that the League of Villains have no idea we have an inside source and we can learn of their plans at any time, Nedzu said with a grin. Still, dangerous, Aizawa said. Midoriya-kun knows the risks, I am sure, Yagi assured. Honestly, I think he might welcome the spying over fighting another BOW, he added with some mirth. There is a risk, true, Knuckle Duster began. But honestly, it is high time we turned the tables on that bastard. This league could grow into a real problem if the issue is not dealt with now, he reminded. Not to mention the fact AFO is nurturing an heir to the throne. That alone is sketchy as hell. The man is vain enough to do so but egotistical enough to try to hold into the crown for as long as he can, agreed, Yagi muttered, remembering his fateful encounter with the monster and how high and mighty he postured himself. How he lauded others by sheer force of quirks alone. He treated himself as a king or god and his whole demeanor during their fight showed him as much. Okay, we know what they are going to do. The question is, what is our attack route? Midnight asked. Because the way I see it, we have too many problems, not enough bodies to throw at those problems. Oh, but we do, Nedzu began. First and foremost, the Hashima base, a quick call to marine-based heroes and we can have a team looking over the area. Once found, we will initiate a raid on it, Nedzu began. This raid will count with the support of the military due to this being a troop base, a large one at that. All this will take us at minimum a week, he added. Once there, the objectives will be simple: pilfer and take any at all files and essentials the troop has regarding their projects, including their teleporting technology. This technology wasn't found on the mobile base, so it is to assume that this one must have one hidden somewhere. We find it, we have the means to reverse engineer their tech and find a weak spot to exploit, Nedzu explained. This entire operation must take us from beginning to end, 2 weeks at most. If we finish earlier, the better. Once this is done, we will send the data to Island. They have the personnel to sort the information and find what we seek, weak spots in the teleportation tech the troop uses, weak spots we can use to defend ourselves and deny the troop one of their greatest weapons. At the same time, a team of heroes will remain on the base, waiting for the League when they make their move, a move they will make once they attack UA in a distraction attack. It will be our calling to start dismantling the League and one of AFO's assets from the roots, Nedzu replied simply. That's step one. Now the teachers were concerned. As you know, the sports festival was cancelled, and even if we are to find a viable counter for the troops' tech, it would be by then too late. The festival is in 2 months, and I doubt an effective way to fight off the tech would be found, even with Island help. So to mitigate this, we will use one of my predecessor's plans for the festival. Their Aizawa grew concerned. You don't mean what I think you mean, right? He asked. It is highly illogical and irrational. It depends mostly on the agencies doing it without any guarantees, he added. By this point the teachers were growing concerned. What are you saying? Midnight asked. If the students can't advertise their skills in the sports festival, then it befalls to us to do so in a safe way for the agencies to take them in without any risks. Nedzu said. We already have a place to do so, the mobile base that now lies deep in UA grounds. I am still wondering why we even took the thing, Power Loader wondered. We haven't even used it for any live exercises, despite being perfect for counter-terrorist training exercises with minimal use of quirks, he added. Oh, we will use it, make no mistake, that will be the stage in which the students will advertise themselves, Nedzu smirked. But now there is one last thing, Yagikuin, yes, the symbol of peace asked. Before I asked you as a favor to get Shield-san's help. Now I am asking you as a fellow hero, to get her help. Her technical know-how is imperative to finally plug the hole the troop has on us. I am well aware that they learned of the USJ attack, not by chance, he said. I know, but Melissa-chan can be stubborn, especially with Island tech. Her seeker minds our I-tech and they guard their tech jealously. We don't need her tech, Nedzu shook his head. We need her to, with the available elements here, plug a leak of information coming directly into troops' ears, Nedzu said. This time we got lucky. The children were prepared enough for it. But next time they might not get as lucky, he reminded. By that time we must guarantee that the next move of the troop is dictated by us, and it's the last they'll ever do. Melissa wasn't what would you call a conflictive woman. True, she would throw down if times called for it, but most of the time she would choose a pacifist route. One that most of the time involved the liberal use of tasers, non-lethal tech, and chemicals forbidden in at least 5 countries because they are pussies. She knew, from a logical standpoint, that becoming a hero meant going into a fight at least once every week and getting into fights with the paperwork. The stories of Uncle Might regarding this are truly the work of horror. She knew that at one point, being the number 9 of a legacy that spawned for over 200 years, she would have to knuckle up and bust a bitch up. Bad. Because in the world there are villains that would rather not engage in fights while there are others who relish in the blood and gore. These ones she had met already, in the USJ, animals that had no disregard for who was their target, only that they could kill and flex their quirks because they feel oppressed by society. It was this very same situation that had her receiving a call from abroad. At first she thought it was her dad. The worrywart, not that she had any space to be judgmental. There was an incident back in Island. He got some scratches and she thought she would never see him again, so she spent the great majority of a week being his shadow and trying to dissuade him of doing anything but staying at home. Granted, she had been 7 at the time, but still. She had answered the call, expecting her dad's voice, a familiar comfort. Hell, she expected her friend's voice because they are as much as worrywarts as she and her dad are to one another. No, instead she got her voice instead. Melissa, I am glad you answered. These encryptions were hard to break through, excuse me. Melissa's mind was already in overwork mode. Her smartphone had its own encryption, different from the one UA used for the calls. She had a slight suspicion that UA's encryption had been compromised once the troop had arrived at the USJ. Now she suspected they were never compromised in the first place if they were sidestepped in some capacity. But the ones on her phone were a different matter altogether. They weren't the SDH variant, not by a long shot, but they were sturdy enough that they require work to even try to crack their first layer. Anastasia was really suggesting what she thinks she is. If so, she's gonna have to call her dad ASAP and issue a blackout in the dorms. This was a serious breach of security. Honestly, I thought UA's security would be sturdier, but what do you expect of an institution with defenses 10 years old? The hell you want? It was no secret in Island that Melissa didn't get along with her mother, which was the understatement of the century. The incident with Izuku's sister was just one of the many ways the woman had tried to undermine Island and bring it to heel, control how the island operated, all in the name of patriotist and unjustified fear. I am hurt. Melissa could literally taste the lie in her tone of voice. Bitch wasn't hurt, she was faking it. After I heard what happened at the USJ, I thought to myself that UA is not the place for you. After all, their support department is subpar and their heroic course is 15 years behind the current curriculum. Cut the bullshit, Melissa immediately said. Don't pretend to care now because you have never cared before. What do you want? She asked. Sigh. Just like your father, this time the voice was colder and more methodical, just like Melissa remembers the woman. I do not lie when I say that UA is not the institution for you. The moment you were recorded with a quirk in usage, I thought to myself you could excel here. In College 51, the program is geared towards making drones out of students. You think me a fool? Only the desperate go to College 51. A hero academy run by the government, the only of its kind in the world, Melissa reminded. Not even Star and Stripe went there, and she is the poster girl for all things American. Because she is a fool that is wasting her quirk while trying to catch onto the shadow All Might cast, a shadow you now follow, Anastasia said. Now you're following a fool's errand and selling yourself to another nation. Don't, Melissa warned. You ever raise your voice to me, you have no right. Melissa snapped, her grip on her smartphone growing a little too tight for the frame of the phone to handle it well enough. You lost any right to patronize me the moment you abandoned Dad, she snapped. Who do you think you are? Talking back to me when I gave you life. I sacrificed everything for you. No. Melissa finally lost it. Don't even suggest you have any power over me, because surprise, you don't. You have no right to direct my life. Crack. Fuck. She hissed as she looked at the remains of her phone in hand. Pieces of plastic and LCD screen cracked under 5% of OFA strength. With a huff she tried to rein herself in. Tossing the remains of her phone on her desk, she began to rummage for the memory slot and pull it out. Just about the only thing that survived her rage-induced grip. Cunt Anastasia stared at her own private phone, a marvel of technology that came straight out of the forges of Area 51. Yes, that Area 51, didn't house alien artifacts. Mostly it housed failed experiments of engineering that could be used against the country, because despite failures they were still feats of engineering. After quirks appeared, most of those former projects were dusted off once more, mostly because now with quirks, some failures became huge successes as quirks broke conventional laws. Soon enough, Area 51 had become a forge for experimental and not-so-experimental tech. The phone of the president and his or her cabinet. It came straight out of Area 51 with its own encryption code and private lines to several other members of the government. So one can imagine the fucking panic it created when they discovered the guy and his cabinet was comprised of troop sympathizers, and they might have leaked the code to a terrorist organization and who knows what else. It eventually led to this phone, leagues above their original counterparts. Say what you will about Samuel Abraham, but something out of the genius of David and Melissa stuck into him. These smartphones, whose casing was hard enough to crack someone's skull in and the display was tough enough to take a 5.56 round, were affectionately nicknamed the Nokia, due to how durable they were. Like goddamn, they were basically handheld rocks. Their software was nothing to sneer at either. It was the reason she was able to crack Melissa's own encryptions. They were the closest one would get to handheld supercomputers and the wet dream of hackers across the world. Still, it was unable to crack the SHD network, and she doubted anything would. This was why she needed Melissa. Of course, she knew that the SHD network was not a solo job from Melissa, but in fact a joint effort from her and her friends. But Melissa was important because she was the one who held the secrets behind the creation of the network. Never mind the software or hardware made by her other friends. Melissa had been the engine behind its creation and knew it from the inside out. If she wanted to have something similar but for the country, she needed Melissa in here, working with them, instead of spilling secrets in another country, giving them an advantage. Honestly, this was her way of saying she found use in Melissa. Before she didn't, and honestly with her on Island there was no way in hell she could do anything to get her out and even consider her offers. But she is in Japan, therefore a free game now. If one were to ignore the fact she is training to be a hero and is currently under UA's tutelage and really on edge after an attack of villains. Okay, she might have overextended in this, something she would not do usually, but honestly the chance to get Melissa to their side was too good to pass out, even if her answer was expected, but still disappointing. Now, knowing Melissa, she would probably start working on new encryption and would block her again, which was vexing, to say the least, because at this rate things would not go their way. And honestly, as things were, it was not acceptable. One might think that they had no enemies and that being one of the most powerful nations in the world meant that only other nations could challenge them. The sad reality was that the nation's greatest enemy was its own people. Or better said, its own people driven by lies. History was a great recorder of how a nation can be born, grow, decay, and die at the whim of a few. A few well-spoken words here and there, and a time of prosperity can become a tie of chaos and disaster. Even in these times of superpowers that made many weapons and methods of control obsolete, one constant remained. A few well-spoken words can cause more damage than any nuke fired from any country. Words have started wars, ended entire bloodlines, devastated entire fields, and torn the world apart on more than one occasion, and her country was heading into that path, again. Ironically, it was not because of foreign powers, but rather the few that think they knew better than the ones in control. That's why she needs Melissa. That's why she needs the SHD network. The very few things Samuel knew about the network painted it as the ultimate surveillance system coupled with a force multiplier for those who use its more exotic aspects. That was just scratching the surface of a system that could easily weed out traitors like snapping one's fingers. It was an elegant solution to a somewhat dirty job. But she knew the SHD network offered more, much more than a glorified surveillance system. Properly dissected, it would offer them the keys to Island, the keys to the academies across the world, the keys to every single security system any government used to protect themselves. They could easily crack into any attempt against them, turn any action into a horrifying trap, be aware of anything, be it internal politics or an attempt to break into the status quo, cause chaos. Not to mention the military applications. Yes, she knew that way back the CIA had employed a surveillance method that had been pretty much a Big Brother system, but archaic, and that depended mostly on those operating it to work, that in sorting out millions of conversations to weed out those that were actual menaces to the government and law-abiding individuals. Melissa, as usual, couldn't see the bigger picture, too focused on reaching a dream that was honestly a waste of time. The world might need heroes, but honestly, they could be replaced by something better than some puff-out and overblown individuals in spandex. Thinking things now after calming down, and honestly realizing that Melissa would not budge of her position, she needed a new angle, a new plan of action. The question was how. She thought about it for a while, but it then hit her, quite easily, and she kicked herself for not realizing this immediately. The USJ attack had been an internal job. UA had a traitor. So, find the traitor, cajole him or her to their side, or, well, unintended consequences. 3 days later, Yuga knew something was wrong the moment the training began. Mostly because it involved doing it with their tracksuits instead of their hero suits. Sensei had explained it as a way to get used to the fact that most times, criminals would attack at odd hours. Even when heroes were out of active service, it was expected of them to assist if the need arise, hero suit or no. Heroes, like doctors, do not have a schedule. Of course, this was just a prelude to what would be today's training. A one-on-one session or duel with anyone in the class was a simple, yet effective way to train, as it allowed both fighters to be prepared when they have to fight a single villain. True, it tried to simulate the event of a fight with a single villain, so in true Aizawa fashion, he added a modifier. Every 30 seconds the fight drags on, a member of the class jumps to fight a designated fighter, dubbed the hero. This of course to simulate the event of a villain getting reinforcements of other villains wanting to bag a hero down. It was a sad reality, but villains tended to mob heroes just because they know heroes are better trained and equipped than the villains, and strength in numbers. Then again, the USJ proved that tactic has its flaws. Yuga bit his lip at that, trying to bury the guilt of his actions regarding the attack. So far Sensei hasn't asked anything of his parents, but it was obvious that at any moment he could just ask and they would have to do it because there was no way to challenge the man in question, too many unknown regarding his many quirks and whatever connections he might have. He thought that the mutation on his quirk would allow him to be free of the yoke of the monster in question, but AFO's hold on his parents was absolute, and he would do anything to keep them safe, even betrayal. It was nothing to him. Family comes first after all. A cry of pain drew him out of his internal monologue, seeing how Momo flew out of the ring, a trail of smoke on her chest indicating that her opponent, Bakugo, had knocked her out with a single blast to her chest. But by the looks of it, he hadn't exactly walked out of that fight unscathed. There was a single-action shotgun laying on the ground, what seemed to be a sack of something the size of a finger on the ground, a single brass knuckle lying on the ground, and Bakugo walking away with a noticeable limp on his right leg and rubbing his left eye. "Fuck, Ponytail. Did you really have to shoot me?" he asked angrily. The girl in question was still catching her breath as she sat up, brushing her chest of any soot. Reaching under her jacket, she pulled a single slab of ceramic that seemed broken and tossed it aside. Had no choice. "You simply go all out. I thought you would appreciate the change of pace," she said as she took a deep breath and stood up. "Well, I did, but fuck you, my eye hurts." "Suck it up." Jiru called from the sidelines while Denki and Mineta cackled. "Fuck you too. Deku, get your damned powers in control already, we need a healer again." Keep pissing the white mage, see how it goes, Izuku muttered as Okako and Melissa giggled at the centuries-old meme he invoked. There Yuga gulped. For all he knew, Izuku was perhaps the greatest danger to everyone in the class. Didn't matter that Uraraka could control gravity. It matters little when she has only one attack option and Midoriya has 11 and maybe can nullify gravity. He exactly doesn't know. Yet the fact remained, he was by far the most dangerous person in the entire school, barring All Might, by the simple fact he had enough powers to match anything AFO might send his way, short of himself taking the battlefield. There was also the fact that he seemed really suspicious of what had led to the USJ attack. He and Melissa, but he discounted Melissa by the fact she only has brute strength and armor. Both can be bypassed. It was a mistake to discount her. One, she would remind him, AMR, Midoriya, to the ring, last fight of the day. Knuckle Duster said as both teens stood up, Yuga with some pep on his steps, Izuku rolling his shoulders. No one noticed the smoldering of his irises. Same rules apply. 30 seconds and I select someone to jump at Midoriya. There were some groans from everyone, including Izuku. We just survived the USJ, are you trying to kill me, sensei? Izuku asked the quirkless brawler. You'll survive it, he waved the concerns as waving false assumptions. With a groan, Izuku assumed his position, while Yuga tensed. He hasn't fought Izuku during their training sessions, however, nearly everyone has. Then again, nearly everyone has fought nearly everyone. Bakugo still held the record of victories with 15 to his favor, a tie against Uraraka and 4 defeats, 1 against Midoriya. The ring looked like someone had dropped a nuke. 1 against Jiru, because she had her gear. 1 against Todoroki, because he tossed a flaming glacier that it caught Bakugo by surprise, and 1 against Mineta. That had been a surprise. A scary one, especially when all Mineta had done was blast balls to his face and then start wailing while Bakugo nearly asphyxiated and had to tap out. Midoriya had 10 victories, but his defeats came mostly from trying something new, which was something encouraged. Better in the training halls where everyone can give their opinions and say where their weaknesses are than on the field, where a mistake can kill. He had the fewer combats, only having fought 3 times, 2 defeats and a victory. Today Yuga would have his 4th fight. He might even win, considering that Midoriya had a nerf during the USJ fiasco. Then again, yesterday he introduced Soto to Suplex City, so there's that. Okay, begin. Yuga was instantly on the offensive. Fists raised, he fired 2 blasts of glittering beams from his knuckles. Each beam was easily dodged by Midoriya and his freakish reflexes, ducking or weaving past the glittering beams before his hands suddenly gained a green tint, small treads of energy on the fingers before Yuga fired his main beam, from his navel. Izuku immediately brought the treads up, each one, unraveling the beam like unraveling a sweater, passing away in a shower of sparks as Izuku approached him. Yuga was not deterred. He had to keep appearances, so he fired again from his hands, this time punching the air and letting bigger, shorter blasts that were the size of his head. This time Izuku glowed green, the treads on his hands becoming many and taking the form of 2 fearsome claws, each one of the 4 digits being longer than Izuku's forearm and thicker too. Now you will learn why Death Claws got their name, he stated as he rushed at Yuga at surprising speed. Murd, Yuga cursed as he began blasting from everywhere, but Izuku was undisturbed. Each blast met his newly named Death Claws, shredding them apart before he lunged at Yuga. In shock, Yuga blasted himself to the left with his feet, shoes being shredded apart as Izuku cut air and instantly moved to chase. Kaminari, you're up, Knuckle Duster replied, making Denki groan. For the record, I am not happy with this, Denki groused as he stood up fast and rushed to the fight, lighting enveloping him. Noted. Also ignored, Knuckle Duster said with a grin as Denki was already on the ring and launching a ball of lightning from his hands at Izuku. The boy in question only had time to raise a claw to block the attack before he realized the mistake he made as static electricity began to coil on his muscles. I hate this attack. Izuku snapped as he activated metabolism, instantly negating the damaging effects of Denki's electro ball on his muscles. I know, that's why I used it. Denki screamed as he landed a punch on Izuku's back, making Izuku turn to take a swipe at him, only for Yuga to land a blast to his side, making him swipe at him. A pattern repeated 3 times. Hagakyu, you're up. Yay. So said girl cheered as she literally jumped and clocked Izuku on the back of the head, making Bakugo cackle in laughter in the background. Enough. With a scream that rattled their bones, and everyone's present, Izuku dismissed his death claws, instead condensing strand on his hand and then turning to Denki, launching the contents on his hand. Instantly it became a small ball that detached into 3 lines with each ball on each end, a bowler. Denki shrieked in shock as the bowler impacted him, treads of energy instantly emerging from the very air, lifting him and suspending him mid-air, arms and legs extended. Why oh Midoriya, what the fuck? It was a sentiment shared by everyone who just watched this. Izuku wasn't done, however, turning his attention to Toru, who eeped, when Izuku gathered more strand energy and tossed it to the side, impacting on the ground before Toru, instantly coalescing into, OMG, they are so cute. On the sidelines, Mina cried, seeing like the rest too small, things that resembles a woodlouse but made of the same strand-like matter. So, are they supposed to hhhmppp? Toru had little to anything before one of the strand threadling latched to her face, and she began screaming and trying to pry the thing from her face but was unable to as a second one latched to her leg with surprising speed, literally taking her support footing and sending her to the ground. With them, down he turned to Yuga. Their Izuku instantly ignited, skin licked by solar light and red-hot embers of smoke that formed into a pair of wings on his back, and his head was adorned in a fiery laurel crown before he rose his right hand and a form began to manifest. A single shaft about the same height as All Might, thin-looking and with a sharp-looking blade that was 2 heads long and smoldering in magmatic light, the entire shaft pulsing with untapped power, Izuku's entire form pulsing with energy as it created an aura heat around him. Yuga, not liking the situation, fired his naval laser, only for the laser to melt midway, shocking everyone. My turn, Izuku called, grabbing the glaive with both hands. Feel the light of the sunshine. With a cry, he slammed the glaive to the ground, but first. Boom! Instantly it generated a concussive blast of heat that blasted Toru into the girls and tore Denki from his prison and into Soto's arms, all while Yuga fired his beams to try to stop the attack, only to be hit by it, like a moving brick wall on fire that blasted off the ring. Okay, that's a match. Midoriya stopped trying to set the air on fire, Knuckle Duster said as Izuku took a deep breath, cracking his neck as he kept the super on. Okay, who wants healing? Izuku asked. His answer was everyone in the class raising their hands. They all got beaten up during the training, and they could use it and lighten recovery girl's job a little. With a sigh, Izuku simply turned the glaive of solar light, edge pointed at the ground, and instantly stabbed it to the ground. Instantly the ground lit up, like a volcano about to erupt, but instead of molten lava, a pool of pure healing solar light formed alongside white smoke emanating from it. Momo and Mina were the first to enter and smiled as the pool of light healed their aching bodies. Oh yeah, I missed this. Inject it into my veins. With that declaration of Mina, everyone in the class entered. Well, nearly everyone. Yuga was still on the ground, looking lost. I thought he was nerfed. I thought he had lost those powers, he thought in panic. This changed everything. Slowly groaning into a seating position, Yuga saw how the class bathed in the healing properties of Izuku's Sunshine's pool. He felt bitter. His recovering was all he thought as he slowly stood up and went to the pool, letting it heal his body from the attack. Unlike the rest, he didn't feel a thing, just bitter resentment over the fact that perhaps the one person that he feared as much as All for One was slowly recovering his strength, and even becoming stronger because of it. He could not fail again. His parents' lives were on the line. Everything was on the line. He could not fail. So, what do you think? Midnight asked their new co-worker, eyes focused on the form of Lady Naginto. Her mistake, kinda. So said woman just looked at the live footage of the training of Class 1A with critical eyes. Not bad, not good, but not bad overall. I can see how they survived an attack like the USJ ambush, kinda replied with a nod of her head. Still lotter of work to be done. That Bakugo kid has talent, but he is too angry. Gotta make him chill, or else he's gonna be killed by his temper alone, kinda stated. Believe it or not, he apparently was worse than now. Guess what happened at Aldera forced him to look at himself, Midnight replied. Kinda simply snorted at that. Seeing your whole classmates die will do that to anyone. Also that Midoriya kid, he was holding back. Not holding back, relearning. Before he had a sword, a hammer, and a maul. I guess he decided to focus all of that into a single thing, Midnight argued. But yeah, don't hold it against him. He is literally relearning how to fight humans. Most of his fights were against bows, life or death, Midnight stated simply. Kinda simply waved her words away. Show me a villain that doesn't want to spill blood and I'll become a nun, kinda replied simply. But I understand. It is hard to learn how to fight another enemy after fighting a single kind 1,000 times over. All the problems look like nails to hammer issues, kinda muttered. However, she said, seeing the pool of energy that seemed to close wounds, erase bruises and revitalize the exhausted. We will need to set up a special security measure for him. He can heal without issues to anyone, yep. Eraserhead said from behind them and on a sofa, still cocooned in his sleeping bag. That alone would make him a target for everyone. Healing without consequences would put him on a tier above recovery girl, who only uses our own vitality to initiate healing. Limited, that is, if we run out of vitality and kill us for it, he added with a frown. Not to mention he has another method of healing, and his healing grenades kinda blinked at Midnight's words. Excuse me, healing grenades. Midnight shrugged with a small smile. Hey, he tosses beach-sized suns as grenades. It is so hard to imagine him tossing healing as grenades. Okay, kinda was going to give the R-rated hero this one. The logic existed, somewhere. The ex-assassin just shook her head in exasperation. We'll need a session with the kid to learn what he can do. What you told me about his latest addition. Strand is basically an agony to grasp onto, especially when someone tried to explain to me he weaponized his fucking mitochondria, and that's his more grounded power, she added with a frown. Both teachers just smirked. It would be a cold day in hell before she can grasp everything that is going to be dumped on her without a headache, and the pounding needs to be plastered afterward. Honestly, said they are expecting her to scream in frustration when he reached his paracausal powers. Aside from that, she suddenly exclaimed, I noticed something, she said, pointing at one of the students in particular, that AMR kid. He seemed bitter, she stated with a small narrow of her eyes. Normally both teachers would chalk it up as teens trying to compare themselves to a peer with superior training or quirk and finding themselves lacking, but current events made them think otherwise. The presence of a traitor among the students, confirmed by Midoriya, and the return of all 4-1, presumed by Eshido and then corroborated by Midoriya, made things different. They were facing a 200-year-old supervillain with no delusions of mercy or compassion, using a kid to spy for him under the threat of death. Part of the course while dealing with the man. Aizawa already had his suspicions after the USJ and the assumption they had a spy on their ranks, but Midoriya confirming it pretty much made his suspicions even worse. Especially when the last person to be in the teacher's room at the time of the press break-in was AEMR. The thing was they had no evidence aside from presence, and it wasn't enough. So, no moves on Frenchie there? Kainer asked, looking at the boy who still looked bitter as he was healed. Only circumstantial evidence. We don't even have cameras on the teacher's room, so we don't even have knowledge of what happened during the break-in, only hearsay, Aizawa stated, eyes on the screen. But the attack lined up with our schedule and names of the students, but it didn't have any description of their quirks, a reason behind the failure of the assault, he added. So, wait and watch. We could wire his phone, see who he calls, Kainer offered, seeing how Midnight cringed. A little hard to do. First off, we don't know if it's Yuga alone taking the orders or if it is his parents transmitting them. That alone raises more alarms than necessary. Second, we would need a permit to wire a phone line or get the transcripts of other calls, and they are a bitch to get. That also requires credible evidence to permit it, otherwise once captured they could claim they were unjustly targeted and there was no evidence for that to occur, and they would be freed and UA would face the consequences while spooking AFO off. Midnight added to a frowning Kainer. Okay, options. Good ones, she asked. We keep watch, normal watch. Yuga may or may not be, but his actions are showing he may be, so we focus on him, make sure that he doesn't realize, Aizawa muttered. Nedzu has already a plan, one that involves the student's future hero works with other pros, and oddly enough, Stain that caught Kainer off guard. What the hell does that rat want to use the hero killer for? She wondered. No idea, but I believe it involves the other information Midoriya got. The one where the League is targeting Stain, so one of his teammates wears his face and uses his clout to gather members into their ranks, Eraserhead stated, eyes dead serious and hardened. All Might has already shown us what happens when people follow a symbol, they want to become it. Midnight said, eyes focused on Bakugo and what Hound Dog had forwarded them regarding his latest profile report regarding the most volatile member of the class. Now imagine that, but on a smaller, concentrated scale, but with the wrong message. What Stain even achieves with what he does, Midnight added firmly. It's not exactly his actions, but the reasons behind it that others follow you, Boob, Kainer muttered with a shake of her head. It doesn't matter how many heroes he kills and how many civilians he condemns. I know what he did to Ruta and how many people died due to that, Kainer reminded. It's the message he spouts. Honestly is both admirable and sad at the same time. The hero he wants us to be simply isn't possible. In comics sure, but not here. We need money to buy food, a roof over our heads, and medical supplies. Heroes don't work on charity, she added as she took a deep breath. What about what Nedzu said? The base? She asked. Aizawa just smirked. Midnight chuckled a chuckle that would make men aroused and women pout in embarrassment. They found the troop had slowly become an actual danger for society. As of last year, everyone came to the realization that they weren't just a collection of quirkless individuals that knew how to make abominations of nature and stole from Island. No, they were an army, and they had the resources to wage war long-term. A meeting in the UN a month prior to Christmas finally put the troop as an international-level threat that had to be dealt with by any means. Any base found had to be razed, the information there pillaged. Any member had to be captured, or if they resisted, terminated. Any abomination, they had to be killed and their remains burned, to ensure no one could reuse them. Any actives the troop might have had to be seized up. Any ally, whenever they had to be captured, regardless of rank and position. This was how serious the threat of the troop was being considered, that no one allied to them was safe, and nothing tied to them was safe. Everything was permitted. That is why when Seilke finally found something odd under Hashima Island 5 days after being asked by Nedzu, he realized almost immediately what he had stumbled on. A massive corridor of metal extended beyond the bedrock of the bottom of the island and even further, with the entrance being an actual door as thick as the walls of UA. He realized he had found it. The entrance to the troop production and assembly facility. Within hours, an underwater demolition and engineering unit of the JSDF had arrived and were making measurements on how to open the door without compromising the structural integrity of the corridor or flooding it with water. A day later, they decided to open a hole in the bottom of the corridor with a plasma torch. It took them another day of non-stop work to open the hole big enough for someone of All Might's bulk but clad in full military gear to enter without issue. Once it was done, the real work began. The same team entered the corridor and began to set up shop, creating a forward base that would act as their entry and exit point, alongside a medical tent should the place not be abandoned. A day later, and there was more activity than before, with a full division already inside, scouting the base inch by inch, taking no chances. Behind them was a team of heroes selected specifically for the task of fighting bows and ending them fast. If something Izuku taught the military and heroes was no mercy and no compromises against the troops' abominations. However, the soldiers were on their own. The heroes hadn't been able to reach Hashima without raising alarms everywhere. Because of the fact they were inside an underwater base, they needed heroes that were both low-key and with quirks powerful enough to stop a bow without blowing a hole in the walls and flooding the base, and killing everyone in. That meant no All Might, no Endeavor, not even Mako, who would thrive inside the base due to being her breath and butter, close combat. Too noticeable, Mako, despite being a lone wolf, had a fan base that was as ravenous as her appetite for a good fight. They tended to know where she was most of the time, same with many heroines. Strong, self-made women that are also fit as a fiddle and can bench press a man 5 times their weight class and put them in an ICU. Hot for many men. As a result, Nedzu was toying with the idea of sending his staff as his new defenses, part of the data UA had taken from the mobile base that had crashed at Hashima months ago. For Sergeant Katsuo Tanaka, it was kinda bullshit when he considered that UA had pretty much had the army search for a base out of a hunch and they were better armed than the fucking army. Then again, everything had stopped making sense after the attack of the troop months ago on the nation and the large-scale butchering of their young. No other way to describe it as that, butchering of a nation's future. He was among the lucky parents. His son was barely a year old, so no worries regarding an attack directed to the really young, but the damage done was akin to the destruction of an entire generation and progress. This was why he had volunteered to join this mission. Everyone in the mission was voluntary for any reason, but the motive was the same. Make the troop pay. Raising his left hand and forming a fist, the squad of 5 stopped behind him. He leaned a little onto the corner, eyes now peeking at the other end of the corner. With his arms still raised, he now formed an open palm, then 2 fingers and made an onward motion. Immediately 2 of the guys behind him moved past him and onto another corner, peeking alongside him. Now forming a full palm, he made a move motion, the team moving with him immediately, their steps echoing over the metal floor and empty halls until they reach a metal, old-fashioned pressure door. With a sigh, Katsuo moved his rifle away, indicating his men to cover him while he reached for the handle and began to twist it, each pressure lock and piston moving away as the thick door began to yield while his men covered his back. Well, 3 did. The 4th had his gun aimed over his shoulder should something crazy come out of the door. With a satisfying grunt, Katsuo finally unlocked the door, reached for his rifle, and moved the barrel to the gap in the door, slowly opening it. The sound it made as it opened made him cringe, but it was nothing compared to the smell that hit the squad as it did. "Fuck, what the hell?" one of his men hissed. "Smells to rotten fish and eggs," he gagged, Being the only one on the team without a balaclava on meant his nose was uncovered. Told you to wear something dumb, oh God. Katsuo actually screamed when he fully opened the door and beheld what lay beyond. A dark room, only illuminated by the light of the hall. The stream of light showed a pile of bones, rotten flesh, and clothes smeared with blood. Coagulated blood permeated the ground like a grisly carpet, and the smell was a constant reminder the pile he could see was just the tip of the iceberg. Jesus, one of his men said as he also beheld the carnage. I guess now we know where everyone went, another said. Katsuo just shook his head before reaching for his neckpiece. FB, this is Lima too. We just found a room with bodies, Katsuo said. Be advised they might be original personnel of the base. Over, this is forward base. We are patching you to Papa Bear. Over, Katsuo sighed in relief. It was going straight to the head honcho. Lima 2, this is Papa Bear. Confirm sighting. Over, confirming. A pile as tall as the room itself, Papa Bear. This reeks of an inside job. They got flayed or something. Be advised, Lima 2, we are sending a forensic team to check the finding, close the door, and mount guard duty until relieved by the forensic team. Over. Wilco, Papa Bear. Over and out. With that done, he reached for the door and closed it with a clang that felt like finality for those inside that room. Sigh. Okay everyone, let's set a guard post. A forensic team will arrive and they will relieve us from this. Until then we sit tight. There was groaning and cringing, and he couldn't fault them. There was a pile of gore and bones just a room away. Stow it. I don't like it either, so we are setting ourselves on the corners and ensuring only ours get past this. The faster we do this, the faster we can go. Let's do this. But his men eventually did as told because they are professionals, despite the horrors they had seen just shy minutes ago. They were soldiers, duty first. We have one officer stated as he glanced at the assembled heroes that were powerful enough to fight a war against the troop and subdue this league of villains, but not that powerful that they might cause a flood-in, mapped over 60% of the base. As it stands, Base Bravo, as we call it, was as our inside source, Mr. X predicted, an assembly line for their mechs and biological weaponry, he said, glancing around, spotting 2 soldiers standing guard and a third taking notes. The machinery shows signs of usage at least months prior to the attack to our country. Furthermore, whatever computers we found in service show that both machines, codenamed Ray and Sahelanthropus, were in construction way longer. Apparently they were planning to deploy them even before whatever happened down there, he added with a frown. On that matter, one of the heroes, Snatch, if the officer was right in his identity, raised his hand. What happened there? We never witnessed something similar during the raids. Most bases were either abandoned or were manned by a skeleton crew, he said. Extra-officially speaking, we believe a coup occurred within their ranks. As you already know, months ago, one Izuku Midoriya engaged against a Terminator doll, codenamed M98, and proceeded to inflict grievous damage and forced it to retreat. The officer began, pacing around. What we learned, however, was that the damage inflicted on it was so great it caused some sort of damage to its brain. Maybe some sort of psychosis altered its parameters and made it turn against its master. This was noted after the exfil of the kidnapped of the Hashima mobile base. Splotches of blood, human blood, littered the base alongside signs of a fight. Several heroes fidgeted at that revelation. It's our belief that this M98 took over the base at the time the Raxus bombing occurred. Several of the teens comment that before crashing a voice seemed to taunt Midoriya-san, both condemning him and praising him. Whatever the cause, it also seems it is making moves against the troop globally, the officer said with a frown, then shook his head, making his way back to the center of the room. But that means we have been given time to prepare for a possible counterstroke, the USJ attack. And Lickers was perhaps a reminder by this M98 that Japan is still a viable target, but one of lesser importance at the moment. We have warned several agencies across the globe about this and a possible escalation akin to the one that occurred here, he added. Meanwhile, we will have our hands occupied with this league of villains. Don't let the name fool you. They orchestrated an ambush on the unforeseen simulation joint and gathered a considerable amount of attackers. The only reason we didn't see fatalities among the students was due to their training and lack of intelligence on the League's part, but that can change, so we are moving to deal with them before anything. One of the heroes rose his hand. Sir, why focus on the League? The troop seems like a more tangible menace, he asked. To that the officer simply nodded at that logic. True, but there is a reason for this, the officer reminded. The League seems to be focused on gathering actual troop tech so they can enhance their own bows. Not only that, we have learned of a ploy by the League itself to attack UA, as a distraction so they aren't bothered here. They know this base exists and are shoring up their strength to move in 2 weeks' time. By that time we must have already found the server room and pulled every bit of data out of it. This is a trap for them. They don't know we know they are coming, the officer reminded with a small smirk. A smirk shared by several heroes. At least we know the identities and quirks of this league, another hero asked. The officer nodded his head. That we do, and if all goes well in 2 days we will have the full hero force and we will assign you your targets, he began, pacing around. For the moment, he said, reaching for his pocket and pulling a small remote. This is what we have to deal with, he clicked once. A screen behind him lit up with life. First on the list is Darby, real name unknown. Quirk, not name no. Extremely dangerous to both him and his targets. The few sighting we had of that clown while using his quirk put that thing at over 2000 degrees Celsius, hotter than lava, but that also means that shit fucks him over, as many of the pictures we have of him show him having artificial patches of skin on his body. He's not immune, but we aren't giving him a chance to attack, he said, clicking to another picture. Kenji Kikishi, aka Magna. Quirk, magnetism, he began. Real piece of work this one, didn't transition well. So she, yeah that's she, has her old muscles and has used them to kill heroes, close combatant, and has a reputation of ruthless, so we are not skimming with her. We are taking her down first chance we got. Another picture changed. Mustard, name unknown. Quirk, gas. So far he is the only member of the league to own a gun, so we are not taking chances. His quirk makes him especially dangerous indoors, so the orders are to disable it immediately. Not much is known considering he got folded by Midoriya. Some heroes chuckled at that. Another picture and some heroes did a double take. Jackal, name unknown. Quirk, null. Meet the killer of over 200 cops, 50 soldiers, a team of special forces, 25 heroes, 5 politicians, 3 international dignitaries, over 500 civilians, and a destroyer of over 10 kilometers worth of terrain and buildings. This asshat has done all this quirkless, but age has caught up to him. Unlike the rest, he's already tagged. Mr. Death and Omega Squad are tasked with dealing with this animal. He does not leave the base alive, the officer said with a sneer, switching the picture again. Himiko Toga, quirk, unknown. She did battle with Midoriya, and in his statement he said that she used over a dozen of different quirks. Yes, plural. She is a shapeshifter and she is not going to be present at this. Apparently, they want her to kill Stain and wear his face as a mask to lure more people to their cause. There's already a dedicated team ready to fight her, but it is noteworthy to put her in the dossier, just in case, he added as he shifted to another picture. Name, Yuriko, actually not her last name, she got disavowed by her family. Quirk, rock joints, he continued. Not much is known of her, only that she has murder on her name, killed the principal and 2 teachers of her school, and from there on out has stolen and left people crippled. Again close combatant, so we are hitting her from afar. Another click. This time there was no picture. We have just the hearsay of Midoriya on this one. A kid, apparently the reason the USJ systems got cracked open like an egg. His name's Gadget and he's a high priority. Surely he will be the one to extract the data around. We don't know what he has or what can do, so the team in charge of him will have to be on their toes with this one. Another click, another image. Now this, Mr. Compress. Wanted for over 100 charges of theft and kidnapping. A fun fact, this guy is the descendant of OG Harima, the peerless thief, so don't discount him just because he steals. He can be as dangerous as anyone else. His quirk, Compress, serves as means of transportation for heavy-duty material and even people, so we must assume he will have some nasty surprises on him. Another click, another image. This one a drawing. Not much about the teleporter of the League, Kurogiri, as we learned from accounts of the attacked class, only that he was solely responsible for bringing about the League inside the USJ without triggering any outside alarms. His quirk does cause spatial anomalies, so we have several already in place when he decides to bring them all in one last click. And another drawing. This one is quite a piece of work, twice. From what we could gather, he might be the disappeared Jinbubai Gawara, responsible for a string of robberies 3 years ago. If it is him, then we are dealing with a cloner, the only good thing so far. This guy doesn't have blood on his hands. All his robberies were made via sheer numbers. Still, he can become a problem. We got direct orders to bring him in. His family apparently are big wigs somewhere and want him back. With that he clicks once more and shows the last mugshot. Last but not least, Shigaraki Tomura. According to one Mina Eshido, his quirk must be a 5-point contact activation, as he tried to tag her several times during the fight. Even Eraserhead confirms this. Don't let the lanky look fool you. He is hard and fast, and it's the apparent leader of this ragtag group of sociopaths. With that the officer killed the feed. Don't need to repeat myself, but these people have access to bows of the kind Mr. X has been unable to identify. only that each one has multiple quirks and has a regeneration factor in them. They will be dealt with by Alpha and Delta Squad, he finalized. We still have 2 weeks to finish operations here, set up the traps, and take whatever it's not nailed to the ground. Make no mistake, this is an asset denial and capture op. If they escape, they do so with nothing to show. He glanced at every hero in the room. Go, he called to the hero on the back. Loath to say this, but your quirk would give you a strategic advantage over them. Instead, we are placing you with the server team. Once found, we are going to drain it dry of data and set up the bigger ambush there. You're part of that team, the officer said. Understand, you're going to either face the brunt of their force if they are teleported directly or wounded and dangerous animals. Either way, you will be in the thick of it, understand? Another day at the office, sir. Won't let you down, the officer nodded as everyone in the room left. Sliding, making his way towards the room he was assigned to, the room being a pretty word to say an actual trailer that would make the current apartments for one person look cozy and large, especially for a guy of his bulk. But it served its purpose. Hidden away from prying eyes, this gathering of soldiers and heroes was made in the most methodical way possible. Not even the media knew of this, not even the locals. But the MLA knew because he told them. Entering this small trailer, he went directly to his bed, reaching under the mattress and pulling a satellite phone. Sleeping over that thing had been hell, all for the cause, he suppose. Igniting it, he instantly dialed the number he was given before and brought it to his ear before closing the door of his room. Sir, he answered the moment he heard a soft intake of breath. Yes, the voice of the supreme leader of the MLA answered to him, comforting. This is serious, they have a full-on operation here. This is both an extraction and a trap, Go said with some trepidation. The League knows, and they also know they are coming, somehow, he said. The voice on the other end now sounded more cautious, as he should. That is unexpected. How? The army credited to the informant of the Colosseum raid, Mr. X. Whoever he is somehow was able to learn a lot about the League of Villains. Hell, the League seems like a legit threat. They are sending one of their own to kill Stain and take his place and use his influence to gather more people to their cause. That is actually impressive, something I would have curious do, minus the supplantation. One more thing. I have been tasked with the server team, and they are still looking for it. The place is massive, sir. The Metal Gears were already in construction even before the Colosseum raid happened. The place is a goldmine of equipment, but I understand, my friend, I am already asking too much from you. Any idea who else is in the intelligence gathering team? None. I am asked to be in the server room as an ambush team. They are planning to take everything they can from the computers and leave the League with nothing. They either capture them or they escape with lesser numbers, Go admitted. They are taking the threat seriously, and so should we. Sliding, continue as normal. Do not attempt to take any information from the computers. We have someone on IT ready to slowly extract data once it has been taken. Just do your job as a hero and apprehend this League of Villains. After all, the revolution cannot afford such thorns like them. Yes, sir. Anything else? If possible, try to find who this Mr. X is. His intelligence gathering has been so far on point. We could use someone like him. Failing to recruit him means we should remove him before he becomes a real issue. He wasn't wrong. In the months following the Colosseum raid, the info detailing every single possible weakness and how to exploit them had pretty much neutered a lot of the deadly potential they had. Use flashbang against lickers, for example. They are blind but they aren't deaf. An extra acute hearing means that a flashbang for them might as well be like getting your eyes smashed in by someone's thumbs. That was just those skinless things, tyrants, nemesis, golems, name it. Mr. X had pretty much outlined several technical weaknesses that could be exploited. Of course, most of the time his number one suggestion was a liberal use of explosives. Explosives that were banned to be used against humans. Humans, that is, not bows, the beauty of technicalities. Very well, sir. For the future, for the future. The line went dead as Go began to wonder how his job go too easy. He idly wondered that he might have jinxed, and by extension, everyone. Next day, UA, grounds Gamma. 1A was in an unusual spot this time. With Class 1B alongside them, none of them with their hero suits. They had to wonder why their senseis had told them to wait while Gran Torino brought someone in. Whoever this person was, it seemed important enough to interrupt what the oldest hero around could teach, beat them. Then they came. First was Gran, his large boots offsetting the sound of soft steps despite how large they were, his cane doing more of the noise than anything else. The second was the one that caught everyone off guard and made Izuku tense, strand forming on his hands and already forming his death claws if need so. Relax, Midoriya. Gran Torino said, making everyone look at Izuku and his nearly deployed claws. He knows who she is, but the introductions are hers to make, so the old man motioned to the indigo-haired woman who gave the combined classes a once-over. Okay, the green guy there knows me by reputation, I'm sure, if the claws are of any indication, she began. But to those who don't, my name's Kaina Tsutsumi, she said, her right hand suddenly folding over and her elbow suddenly opening up, revealing a long, smooth barrel that was held together to the elbow by gray sinew and blackened muscle. Without a single preamble, she reached for her hair, curled it over her finger, and plucked a piece, now molded into a small dart-like bullet, she introduced into her right palm. Then she took aim. The class looked up, seeing now a small drone moving at great. Suddenly the drone was reduced to pieces, all while the class looked back at the woman in shock. 2 kilometers. Not bad, but I'm kinda rusty. Anyway, I'm also known as Lady Nagant. And now that made the class actually tense up. Her real name they didn't know, but the other name, oh, that one everyone knew. As of today I am going to teach you all hero morals. Yes, I know it's ironic. Nedzu's idea of a joke, I am sure, but I am not going to even consider what goes through his mind, Kaina said as she walked around. But let's be real here. I am here for another thing, reinforce the security of the school and teach you what not to do as a hero. Trust me, there is a lot of it, and most of it involves not killing the Karen, Kaina muttered. I thought Karens went extinct, Mineta muttered to Zero. If only, Kaina actually answered, making Zero and Mineta blink. One thing, do not refer to me as Lady Nagant. That name's buried and gone. I am here as part of a security detail and teacher, but I am not an active hero at all. My license to teach hasn't expired, but my hero license did. I have permission to use my quirk inside UA and outside if by any fluke someone decides to take potshots at you. Other than that, don't expect me to shoot a tree to free a cat down a branch. Tried it once, it was messy on the sides. Eraserhead was questioning his life choices. I know some of you will mistrust me. I got the 3rd degree from the 2nd years a class ago, and oddly enough the 3rd years were kinda chill, so I won't take it personally if one of you gives me the side glance or decides that having his quirk deployed already is an extra safety net. If you feel I'm going to put a bullet on the back of your skulls. Everyone looked at Midoriya and his hands, filled with strands filaments, and how his fingers curled and moved about. Not going to pretend what I did was wrong, because it was, but they kinda asked for it. Kinda began. They wanted a weapon, they got one. But one thing they forgot about heroes is that they aren't weapons, they are humans, and as all humans there is a limit to everything, she stated. Mine came when I couldn't see a group of kids without seeing them neck deep in blood, she stated with a frown. That and the former president thinking he could take me on while already having a suicide note with my name on it. Cute, but there is so much someone whose entire quirk revolved on how perfectly imitate the penship of others can do against someone who has an antimaterial rifle as an elbow. Some on the class nodded. In hindsight it was true. So today we are starting small, she said, looking to the side and seeing what seemed to be a walking mannequin. Kaina shook her head at the contraption. Meet the all-purpose emergency decoy system. Back at the HPSC and hospitals we call it honk, she said, motioning to the one thing that stood up of the mannequin. The red bulbous nose. Think of it as a Terminator, not a doll but an actual Terminator from the movies, but it meets Operation the board game, an internal chassis that resembles a human skeleton, tendons and muscles made of hollowed-out carbon fiber, organs that are in fact fake but very realistic, and skin that while plastic-looking is real to touch, all connected to a computer that allows its movement. Honk here is here to teach you where not to hit, she emphasized. The human body, despite its evolution and the fact a quarter of humanity is basically a mesh of body parts, still, at its core is copied and pasted, she began. A heart, a stomach, kidneys, lungs. All vital parts, she continued. As heroes, it's pretty much a given you'll face someone and throw hands, and in those moments you'll think, go for the eyes, good tactic. But to the media that might as well label you as a savage animal. You can disable someone if you punch them hard enough in the liver. Cleaner, the media doesn't get their panties into a twist, so today's exercise is where to punch. Eraserhead here might think that slamming someone's head into the ground is a good idea until they are concussed and speaking gibberish and their families hire a lawyer. I think that sometimes making them shit themselves with a liver punch while puking bile is way better, and to make things interesting, there will be no quirk usage, just plain old strength, she said as she walked towards Honk. Punch bad, she said as she suddenly turned and landed a punch where the liver was, but nothing happened. And Honk here will tell you, or rather not tell you, punch right. However, she punched again. This time the angle was different and the nose of Honk light up while making a ringing sound. And you'll know you did right. We'll do this until you can punch quirkless, Then we'll move on how to do it with a quirk and so on. Several of the students looked at some of their classmates, the ones that were obviously strong and could not turn their quirks at all. For those who can't turn off their quirks and therefore their enhanced strength, think of this as an exercise in self-control. You can pretty much get killed by a broken knee or broken veins, and not treatment can cause it to gangrene. Now imagine what would happen if the liver blows up because you can't hold your strength. The ones that could not turn their strength off cringed at that, but nevertheless nodded at her logic. Also, with a snap of her fingers, 5 more honk mannequins walked to the training area, lining up in a neat row. We don't have all day, so all of you are taking turns. Each one gets 3 hits, then switch to the next in line until you all get it. Like a switch was flipped, everyone lined up and began to practice what they were shown. It was obvious from the start that those who had some basic anatomy knowledge or were trained for combat knew where to hit and how hard to. People like Ojiro, Soto, and Shoji caught on quickly and hit the target consistently, as did Kendo, Kaibara, Shishida, and surprisingly Shoda. Others like Izuku and Ahiro, who had to tone themselves down, needed 3 tries until they could measure how much strength was enough to cause a ring and from there be able to do it in a row. Pony and Mineta, of all people, were able to land somewhat consistent hits in different ways. Pony with her feet because they were hoofs and horses have anvils for feet, and Mineta with his head when it became apparent he would not be able to land a punch due to his stature. All the while Kaina observed with a critical eye that she did a good job for the sheer and simple fact of not doing what they once did with her, pretty much belittling her and taunting her. It was this that allowed her to see the class's mood in general and how they interacted with one another. It was this that allowed her to see how Uraraka of all people was guiding Yoroorozu on how much strength was needed to cause Honk to, well, honk. It was this that allowed her to see Bakugu struggle on his own punches, seeing how sometimes he shifted into a palm strike out of instinct and be ready to blast with his quirk, and only Zero grasping his shoulder and taking his turn permitted him to center himself and try again after 3 turns. It was this that allowed her to see Aoyama's frustration bleeding into his punches, how in many of those his quirk nearly bled out and punched a hole in Honk. How he was using the dummy as an outlet for anger more than anything else. How, unlike Bakugu who had someone basically reining his temper, or like Yoroorozu who had someone helping her, he had no one helping him, not out of spite to him, but because he had permitted it so, because he wanted it so, because he looked paranoid. Kaina pursed her lips a little and her eyes narrowed. Little by little the theory that he might be the rat was taking shape, but they were more than just assumptions in order to catch one in the act. Honestly, Midnight was right in there not being conclusive evidence regarding his participation in the USJ assault. They didn't even know why he did it. A part of her reminded her that people seldom need a good reason to do stupid shit, like what she did, or what the HPSC did, or many others. The list of reasons he could have ended up betraying his class to the villains was long and messy, from money to his parents being caught by villains or just because he's an asshole. However, considering how he acted and how frustrated he looked, it was obvious there was pressure from the outside for him to succeed. Mineta, the shortest and overall weak member of the class, if you ignore his ability to block your nose with sticking balls, looked frustrated too, but at himself for being, well, short, a thing she knew well enough to identify, therefore he didn't look so stressed. Just a simple case of my body isn't good enough for this shit scenario. Most of the class was cleared in this scenario. None looked like something else, but their own motivation to become heroes was moving them onwards, all but Aoyama, which painted him in a bad picture. After all, they did survive together both the Hashima Mobile Base and the USJ. Those kinds of bonds are made of stern stuff and forged in blood and strife, making them durable. Breaking them meant that trust is broken. Trust in placing one's life in someone else's hands. That kind of betrayal was hard to forgive, if ever. With a critical eye, she turned to Eraserhead. A simple glance conveyed everything. They would have to focus on Aoyama and hope he wasn't the traitor, and if he was laying a trap and let himself strangle with the cord they will lay for him. All for one was too dangerous to let sentimentalities get in the way of ensuring his entire operation go down in flames. 2 hours later, the classes were dismissed as the day rolled over. In Kaina's opinion, they made good progress. Nearly half of both classes now knew how to throw a punch to save their lives and not depend much on their quirks, which was a plus in her eyes. As the classes ambled away, she saw Midoriya actually separated from the class, alone. Good. A small whistle of her caught his attention, and only his. She motioned with her head to follow her while keeping an eye on anyone that might be overhearing. No one was, again good, especially considering that Aoyama had left first. The kid followed her, a small strand of green energy on his fingers being an indication he was wary of her. Again, good but ouch. "I'm here," he whispered, yet his voice was loud enough that it matched the description of what he could do if he screamed or if he really put his back into it. Screamed. "Okay," Kinda began, leaning on a wall and crossing her arms. "I know, and therefore the teachers are aware that you might be looking for the spy that started the USJ mess." She went straight to the point. No reason to sugarcoat it. As she saw him take a more hostile stance, she went for the neck. "And I want you to continue looking into that." He went slack. What, he wondered. "You hear me," she continued. "One of the reasons I am here is to flush the traitor out. The actions of the League pissed Nedzu something fierce. He wants us to find the traitor and use him or her to tear the League of Villains apart. For that to happen, however, we need a way to lure them out." Izuku nodded at what she was getting at. "And the traitor is our way to lure them, right?" She nodded. "Yep, but we don't know who is it and more exactly why he or she did it. Money. An urge to see the world burn. Family in danger. Whatever the reason, it got you guys in danger. And even more, it outlined their main goal," Kinda said. "All Might. The Nomu that the T-Doll took over seemed designed to fight him." She nodded at his logic. "We were just collateral. You were convenient targets," Kinda began. "Used to lure All Might and ensure he was mad enough to ignore the fact this was an ambush first and foremost. I'm sure this League didn't have plans of letting you all live. The fewer heroes the better in their logic." She spoke with clinical precision, making Izuku frown. "Look," Kinda continued, "you're about the only person that can infiltrate the League and get info without getting caught. Use that strand thing and keep yourself appraised of any information that might help us. I am going to meditate today and see what I can dig up before Toga goes to Hosu and starts her hunt on Stain." Kinda nodded. "Hosu. That place is dangerous for both heroes and villains. From what I heard, several gangs have set up shop and the heroes there are struggling with the limited numbers they have, so some get creative in how they fight. It's the perfect hunting ground for Stain to do his thing as he did before." She did note how Midoriya scowled at the mention of the hero killer. She chalked it up to the fact Izuku's mother got a knife to the ankle after driving the man away. She has to meet the woman that stopped Stain and matched him blow by blow. "Keep your eyes and ears open, kid," Kinda reminded. "Right now we are on high alert due to the other thing that will happen." Izuku nodded at that, fingers slowly flexing. "The bombs that would be used on UA to distract everyone of the League's next move. I am sure our little friend told them where to hit or when it's a good hour to do so, so we gotta be ready when that occurs." Izuku nodded at her words. "Okay, off you go." And this conversation never happened. For a moment Izuku simply smiled. "What conversation, sensei?" Kinda matched his smile with hers. "Yes, which one?" "Okay, Uncle, run to this to me again." "Well, YA?" Melissa had tried to make it to the dorms. Keyword, tried when Uncle Might had intercepted her and pretty much asked her to meet him in a private meeting room or restroom that Aizawa sometimes used to rest. Of course, she knew that maybe he had pulled her to the room to talk OFA-related stuff. The quirk was a cryptid that simply refused to yield its secrets. Despite the fact she had communicated with one of the vestiges before and Izuku could call of Vela any of the ghosts at any time, there hasn't been the time or privacy to do so. What she didn't expect was that he would try to convince her to build a poor man's version of the SHD network for UA because of the troop and the League. Because apparently having a former assassin of the HPSC who could shoot a fly at a mark of 3 kilometers with a bio rifle and bullet made out of her hair, having a literal army of robot ninjas and at least 3 fucking Fulgor on storage alongside the fucking mobile base that crashed on Hashima as both training ground and a bunker wasn't enough. "We need you to help design a control system akin to the SDH system," Yagi repeated, raising a hand before Melissa could say anything. "And no, we aren't asking you to build the SHD network from scratch," he continued. "So far, we have seen that the defenses of UA and the USJ are severely lacking compared to our adversaries. Especially whatever the child, gadget, used," Yagi admitted. "Both facilities share the same software for control of the defenses, and they are now severely lacking, so you want me to replace the entire defense system. Do you have any idea how tall of an order that is?" Melissa argued. "No, but what Nedzu wants more is a way to have control of the systems," Yagi reminded. "Remember that your SHD network is more than a surveillance system. It is a coordinator of efforts. Nedzu wants a system similar to that, so we can coordinate with more efficacy because these attacks won't stop," Yagi admitted as he linked his hands together. Melissa, all for one, was behind the USJ attack, Yagi admitted to his niece in all but blood. Young Midoriya's new power, Strand, allowed him to link his mind to 2 members of the League. It allowed him to confirm who was behind the attack and what they are planning. Melissa actually reeled at that bit of news. Crossing her arms, Melissa mulled over the information given to her and what happened days ago with her mother. To be honest, I might do it. Just days ago my mother called. Yagi blinked in surprise at that. That's good, thinking that there had to be a wholesome reason for Melissa's estranged mother to call her. I have her blocked, and she breached the security protocols on my phone, which I broke after she made me angry. That's bad, Yagi admitted. Melissa shook her head at that. Uncle, those protocols are similar to the ones used by the phones back in Island. If she breached mine, chances are she can do the same with the others. And to add, she had to go through the firewalls of UA. Melissa let that sentence hang. For a while, Yagi remained silent, considering what was told to him. Okay then. So this got bigger than expected. Melissa nodded at that. I think the first thing to do here would be to gather a team, Melissa began. This is a tall order, a big one. We have a route to follow. Honestly, all we need is time, Melissa reminded, flexing one hand and letting one for all pour out. Honestly, Gran Torino has been a great help. Izuku too. His insight on how quirks work makes him the perfect person to help me train with one for all and see where I go wrong from time to time, she added. I agree, Yagi said. And honestly, time is the one thing you all might have. There are operations in the work to ensure the league is dealt with, and with the sports festival cancelled due to the troops teleporting tech. He let the sentence hang. There, Melissa grimaced. Melissa-chan, something the matter? Yagi asked. Yeah, about that 1A dorms. Momo was prepared for a lot of things. It came with the territory of being roommates with 19 chaos gremlins, as Mina once described the class and herself once. It also helped that one of the gremlins pretty much manifested the forces of the universe from time to time and was non-chaotic, or as much as he tried, considering that he tended to leave a sweat of chaos whenever he fought. The mob of general class students waiting for them at the entrance of their dorm was not something they were expecting, especially when they saw 1B also approaching the mob, looking thunderous. You looked ready to murder someone, and considering how neutral the girl keeps her expression, then something had gotten under her thick skin, and she was showing her displeasure to everyone to see. Oh dear, is not just her, is everyone in 1B. Walking towards the gathered group and seeing Kendo doing the same, both class presidents made it to the mob. Momo did it faster because she wasn't in the mood of trying to calm Bakugu or telling Midoriya to use stasis on him or something. She honestly doesn't know if he can still use stasis, or see why Kendo seemed ready to pummel everyone on the mob to the ground. Okay, enough, Momo began, cutting to the chase before the mob can gain momentum. What is going on? You have some explanation. Why is Kendo-san ready to attack? She demanded in a firm tone. And before you say anything, let me remind you that both classes came together of the same lesson. They were fine when they left to their dorms, so speak, she demanded again. What's going on? One of the general class students began. Is that you asshats ruined it for us, he added, his hair vibrating like a rattlesnake tail. They cancelled the sports festival, a girl in the back of the mob called out angrily. Do you have any idea how that's going to fuck us up? How are we supposed to even show we can be in the hero course hell in this, the USJ? Because they had to come and save you and got paranoid and cancelled it. One of the students cried out. Then Momo actually took a deep breath, debating on how to approach this issue without causing more problems with the rest of the classes. Once upon a time she would have approached this diplomatically, but without inciting hostility. Once upon a time she didn't shoot a classmate with a magnum when he ripped the head of a deathclaw with his bare hands as a roided-up rabbit out of fear, and once upon a time she didn't bunk up with a bunch of people that would make her parents' friends to raise an eyebrow. She had learned a lot from all this. Therefore, she did a bakugu, a diplomatic one that is, which in hindsight is a tame, curse-free non-diplomatic dissertation of their points against them. Okay, first off, Momo began, a tone that made everyone in her class take a step back, even Bakugu, who sought refuge behind Denki, who sought refuge behind Jiru. We had no guilt behind the cancellation of the sports festival. We are as affected as you are, if not more, Momo replied with a clipped tone. Second, the USJ was an attempt on our and All Might's life, and you are worried about if you can take our spots, she added, her tone a little higher than before. Third, several of my classmates got hurt. We were ambushed by a company of villains and then by the troop. And you are all worried by a pointless act that might become a target for another attack. She snapped, everyone in the mob actually taking a small step back at her tone. At that moment Izuku finally caught up with the class, seeing the mob and the two hero classes and Momo as the tip of the spear. Hey, what did I miss? He wondered. Now, Kendo-san, what happened to make your entire class come here? They attacked Shinsu. Kendo snapped. He got first to the dorms after training and got mobbed. By the time we got to him, they were making their way towards you guys, she added as she took a step forward, fists already torso-side and ready to punch someone back into the Stone Age. There was a tense silence as both hero classes looked at the mob and then at one another. Then they began to advance. Okay, enough. Izuku suddenly snapped, his voice making everyone cringe as the air rippled around as he moved to where Momo was. You guys better start moving out and thinking of applying to another school, Izuku snapped. This is a hero school. We are all here to learn how to help society not attack one of our own, he added, eyes now burning with solar light. Some of the mob actually looked down, not meeting his gaze after he pointed out the obvious. Look at me when I am talking to you all, damn it, he shouted. Now everyone gritted their teeth, everything inside them feeling like jelly. Better be thankful I am only screaming at you and not letting one be take their pound of flesh, because you all damned know that you would do the same if one of us attacked one of you, he snapped firmly. There the mob began to disperse, looking ashamed of what they had done. Izuku simply shook his head as he huffed angrily, looking at Kendo then. Is Shinsu okay? He asked as Itsuka disengaged her quirk, slightly nodding. Can go and heal him, still got mitochondria healing or a healing grenade. Thanks, Midoriya-san, he'll take the mitochondria. Not too hot about the grenade thing, I admit, she said as she helped corral her class and lead them back to their dorm with Izuku in tow. Not gonna lie, I expected some blood, Bakugo hissed as Momo just sighed at that comment. But you killed it, Ponytail. Coulda used more cursing, but that's just me, he said with a small, approving grin as he made it to the dorm. One by one the members of 1A entered the dorm, all but Aima, who looked at the still retreating forms of the General Studies class, a small frown on his face. One that got deeper as a nasty idea came to his mind, one that he wished not to entertain, but to ensure that nothing happened to his parents, it should do. I see, Yagi muttered. I never expected that the cancellation of the festival would hurt so many, he admitted. Melissa, fresh from explaining what she had heard, nodded. The guys in support were miffed but somewhat understanding. They know it's not our fault that the USJ turned out as it did, and they know why Nedzu cancelled the festival. The troop's ability to teleport from anywhere and can't be stopped is, I understand too, Melissa admitted. I did send this info back to Dad. His last email pretty much said that Island is currently on internal orange alert. All security forces are armed and ready for combat at any given time with standing orders to kill on sight. Usually the defenses are on yellow alert all the time. But to pass to orange, well, things are bad. Island changed positions again, making sure the troop can't get a lock on the island. At least that is one weakness that can be exploited, Yagi admitted, noticing early that the teleporter so far sent things in a static point, not a moving target. So far Island was safe. That could change with time. The troop was insidious and stubborn. Things thought impossible were brute force to be possible just to reach a goal. The Bows and T-Dolls with quirks just to kill young Midoriya came to mind as a great example. Anyway, all that is left is the sports festival, Yagi admitted. That one hurt, not gonna lie. But Nedzu made a sensible choice. It would have stung more if he had cancelled it a week before it happens. Yagi nodded at that, agreeing that delaying the inevitable while hoping for a miracle was something Nedzu would not do. He worked on logic, and logic dictated to cancel the festival before things got dangerous for the teens, especially considering that the festival was the most viewed thing in Japan. A televised disaster would hurt more than the cancellation. Honestly, it was for the best. Besides, Nedzu never said that this year's festival was fully cancelled. It could be done 6 months from here onward after the troops' teleporting tech and the League is dealt with. Especially after the League is dealt with. No, Melissa said. We still have AFO to deal with, and considering what you told me about him, I want to be prepared for anything, she said, leaning onward. Melissa-chan, is my responsibility, Yagi argued. He stopped being yours when you passed me a haunted quirk, Uncle, Melissa joked, but then got serious. I understand where you're getting at, Uncle. You thought you got him, only for him to resurface, but considering how secretive he is right now shows that just like you, the sequels of your last fight are slowing him down, Melissa admitted. He might be a 200-year-old cryptid, but we have several advantages, she said as she rose her hand. One for all is getting stronger. You are one of the, if not the only survivor of a direct confrontation with him, and know how he fights and what quirks he used. We got Izuku and his ability to peer into the League's mind and plans, and between him and me we can dissect any quirk and how it functions in a matter of seconds, and he doesn't know if OFA has been passed down, she listed. So, Uncle, she added as she reached for her S-Watch and activated the record mode. I want you to tell me everything about the guy, how he fights, what quirks he favors. Can he combine quirks and most importantly his personality, she stated firmly. Melissa-chan, Yagi said with some trepidation. Uncle, she continued, I know you feel he's your responsibility, but one day he will become mine or he will decide fuck it, let's do this right here and now, and in the state you are the only people capable of standing their ground against him are me and Izuku got really weakened after his fight with Toga. We need to know how AFO ticks in a fight if we want to bring him down, she reminded. Then she reached for her uncle's clasped hands, seeing how he clenched them both hard. Trust in us, uncle. I know where you're getting at, but we got to press every advantage we got. He knows it, and that's why the USJ happened. It's time we start clapping back, and whatever you tell me of his fighting style, what quirks he used on your fight years ago will be an advantage he thinks we won't use because we are heroes and we got to remain squeaky clean and play by the rules. Well, I refuse to play by the rules, she reminded. Yagi slightly smiled, closing his eyes and grasping his hands with hers. Okay then, he whispered. But also, I'm sorry for putting this burden on you, he said. I knew what I was getting at when I got OFA. I wasn't stupid enough to think your arch-nemesis didn't just croak it without leaving another way to screw us up. He sounds petty like that. Your wound shows it. He just underestimated how nasty I can get when I'm motivated and got back up. And I got both in truckloads, she said with a smile. So, about his quirks, she said. There, Yagi took a deep breath. I can start by saying that he likes to name them when he activates them. I counted over 10 strength enhancement quirks and at least 3 speed-based quirks to match my first blow, all activated at the same time. Yagi spent 2 hours describing to Melissa how that fight had gone, each quirk used and each taunt utilized. By the end, Melissa had a somewhat clear picture of what All for One was, and how the man was as an individual. Now to show this to Izuku and start working on what her uncle asked her. Truth to be told, she is looking forward to this. It's been a while since she had pulled all-nighters, and honestly, between her and Izuku's combined brain power dedicated to dissecting quirks, they will have a clear strategy on how to face this demon lord when the time comes. Of course, if her uncle permits it, that is. Toru wasn't exactly permitted into the meditation room per se, mostly because of her desire to start blasting K-pop instead of some Zen song or some shit. Toru wasn't exactly barred from the room either. Everyone was welcomed, even Mineta. But her exuberance tended to play against her when she tried to remain silent, on her own in a single room. That's why her bedroom has so many plushes for her to muffle her face in. Then again, she had business within the mediation room, or rather with someone in it. Ever since, well, they started rooming, Toru had been able to bond with pretty much everyone. It came with the territory of being super bubbly. She had bonded so fast with the girls, especially with Mina. The boys were another matter, but she could easily call them all friends, especially after the Hashima incident. You just don't come out of something like that without bonding. Well, all but one. Yuga. It had been infuriating, to be perfectly honest, for a girl as outgoing as her for not being able to strike a proper friendship with the French or Japanese guy, but in all fairness, it was his fault. He had been avoiding pretty much every attempt at socialization, or to be precise, any attempt at, well, anything. And it had started once they had become classmates, not before. During Hashima, he had been more jovial, extravagant, and outgoing, with a dash of flamboyancy that sometimes got to your nerves. Now, however, he retired to himself. He rarely ate with everyone, and he always seemed eager to return to his room after classes. He also looked angry, frustrated even. She noted that most of the time it was at Midoriya, but to be fair, he seemed to be pissed at everyone really, how fast they progressed in their training. It bothered her something fierce, so she hoped Midoriya might have some answers to this. Granted, everyone might have some level of envy of Midoriya considering how versatile his quirk is, but she would be lying that envy she sometimes felt also motivated her to do her best and tame her mutated one. So if anyone could tell her what might be Aima's problem, it might be Midoriya. Might. Opening the door, she actually blinked when she spotted Mina, not Midoriya, in the room. Also, she was doing a handstand with a single hand. Oh, hey Toru-chan. Mina said as she showed the strength she had in her arms as she pushed herself onto a small jump, spun once in the air, and landed on her feet with nary a sound made. I see with Midori-kun uses the place. I don't know if his light is doing something to the room, but you feel you got to push yourself, she said with a grin. So, what's up? Nothing much, Toru muttered, a small idea forming. Say, have you tried to socialize with Aimakuin? She asked. There she noted how Mina's cheery demeanor changed. Tried it, a lot actually. He stonewalls me every damn time, Mina pouted as her tail moved in an annoyed pattern, displaying her mood. Worst of all, it all began exactly 2 days after we started classes. He wasn't like this when we chatted before, Mina muttered to herself. Yeah, remember how friendly he was while Midori was coaching us on our new quirks? Mina actually nodded at that. Now he's all grouchy. Yeah, Mina nodded to herself, remembering so far how Yuga had been interacting with everyone. Hell, even Bakugo had been friendlier, and that was a feat considering he admitted he had been a ball of rage and insecurities. Whoever was his therapist deserved a raise and beer for life. Then a thought made Mina frown. It was true she wasn't the sharpest tool in the shed, but given the dots, she could connect stuff, and in hindsight, things were starting to connect in such a way that made some sense, if you looked hard enough, that is. You know, Mina began. He began to get edgier after the USJ, she muttered. Like Bakugo moody, but with some Tokuami dusted in, she rationalized. That would make him Todoroki moody, but with some angst. But you're right, Toru argued with a nod. He's just not him anymore. She questioned herself as she leaned on a wall and looked at Mina with some concern. The villains were waiting for us, Mina muttered. They hacked the USJ defenses too easily. Hell, they send Midori to a spot where a bunch of people that hated him were waiting. For him. That was planned, Mina stated, a small quiver in her voice. Melissa-san did say that the UA barrier got corroded days before the assault, right? And that villain you fought seemed hellbent on tagging you, right? Mina nodded at her friend. Then there is all that happened with that Nomu thing, the troop, and how even the villains were caught off guard. For a minute they remained quiet, until Mina sighed quietly, a resigned and defeated one. Someone told them, Mina concluded. Someone is helping the villains. It's the only way all this happened. The USJ was way too coordinated to be an attack out of a whim. They didn't know our quirks evolved. Yuriko didn't, Toru hissed with some anger. And the only reason they knew Midori was a menace was that the troop had a target painted on his back and he had been fighting them for some time. The visible, oh invisible girl said, trying to find a reason that might not be a betrayal of one of their own. Also, Mina muttered. They were aiming at All Might. That Nomu thing was apparently designed to fight him head-to-head, Mina reasoned. Only our class would have a class with him that day. Mina said with a sad frown, the truth slowly dawning on her and making her depressed. Slowly sliding out of the wall and into the ground, Mina brought her legs to her chest and hugged them. Toru-chan, someone betrayed us. It's someone from our class, Toru said, walking to Mina and then sitting at her side. And you know something, I think we both know who it is. For some seconds Mina considered Toru's words, blinked, and narrowed her eyes. Yeah, question is, what do we do now? Simple, Toru began. We keep watch, and the moment he tries it again we strike. Yeah, Mina nodded, eyes now gleaming with some malice. Betrayal of this caliber was unforgivable. We are not giving Yuga the chance to stab us in the back again. 2 days later, Hosu. Himiko had made it to Hosu with relative ease. Relative, mind you. Some dumbass had damaged the railroad while trying to escape Kamu Wood, so she had to shift lanes midway to reach her destination, something that had caught her and everyone else off guard. But she is perseverant if nothing else. Leaving the train cat, looking like an average student, brown, long hair with deep blue eyes, and a small greenish skin tone, Himiko walked among the throng of civilians making their way anywhere, another face in a mob of faces. She had a target, a place to stay, a general understanding of her target's own prey, and a time limit to reach him before the distraction triggered everyone. She had this, she only had to keep her head in the game, and she drank enough blood to keep herself from deviating. She was unaware she was being hunted. She was unaware that she had eyes on her everywhere. She was unaware that she had eyes using her eyes to see what she sees and hear what she hears. She was unaware that she wasn't the hunter, but the hunted. Chapter end notes. Mina and Toru, the derpy heads of King Ghidorah, share a single, dead brain cell. Also Mina and Toru, that brain cell once in a while light up like a neutron star and they can answer the riddles of the cosmos in a minute flat. So who expected those two to be closer to getting the traitor than Izuku and the staff? No one. Well, good, otherwise I might have shot myself. Now the real challenge will be catching Yuga red-handed, but considering the number of eyes looking about, that will happen. But if you expect he might not escape or get another scenario like in canon, you would be wrong, because Yuga is going to do something the class ain't going to forgive, all for the sake of family. After all, the path to hell is paved with good intentions. With that said, HYPN0S sings off, wishing you all a lovely day. Chapter Summary. Revengeance, Part 1. The stage is set, the criminal actors are ready, and the crippled director is seated. They have yet to learn what script the heroes have written for them. Chapter notes. I am back. HYPN0S here with another chapter of Hack 2. after a freaking year of hiatus because of things. So let's get and address the elephant in the room. I decided to hold on until I could see the end, or at least see the direction My Hero Academia was heading. As of now, we know where it went. I won't hide my disappointment with the ending, which was bare bones if I'm honest. At first, I was disappointed, which led to a small bout of sadness because the manga ended on such a low note. Then came thoughts. I think Horikoshi wanted it to end this way. An open end if I'm honest. Let the fans decide how the end goes. There are so many jokes that Izuku now is working on a McDonald's that aren't funny, and the amount of NTR art just went to the sky at the moment the first leaks of the ending came about. Also, it didn't confirm any pairing, which is odd considering that while this is shonen, at least the heroes tend to have a love interest and they end up with them. It is almost a written rule in shonen, and don't tell me about Gentle and La Brava because those were open about their love. So I'm a little salty. Read, I am currently capable of filling Earth's core with my salt alone. That the only maybe confirmation of Izuku and Okako was that she was wearing his breathing mask around her neck, but that is overshadowed by the fact many believe she and Bakugo are dating, and the last image is of the whole group is missing Bakugo's left arm, and many assume that arm is around Okako's waist, and some even dirtier are thinking he is groping her. Hence why I hate NTR with the passion of 1,000 suns. Couple that with an awful truth many find after leaving school and starting a job. Sometimes we don't have time for our old friends, or a social life. This goes quadruple in Japan, a country that has a term for working to death, so for them, a day to decompress and meet friendships and get drunk with them is a must unless they want to lose their shit. That one line that Izuku and company can't meet too much due to their work hits home. I only have been able to meet one of my old classmates, and that is because she comes around to buy stuff with her husband, and she comes to buy where I work, and last time I saw her was over a year ago. So I get it. Then comes the fact and assumption that they might have been ghosting Izuku because they have a surprise for him, which I guess is both good and bad. Still, this is the guy that fought the strongest quirk users in the world, lost his arms, recovered them later, and the guys in 1A were pooling their resources to get him an Iron Man suit. Now every writer who made Izuku remain quirkless and fight with gadgets or armor is justified, but not communicating and just assuming the guy was okay. Not cool, and also a mistake by Horikoshi. I had a small chat with one writer who writes one of my favorite HP stories, and it seems that this all stems from Horikoshi's pathological want to keep Izuku as the underdog while Bakugo gets everything and is scot-free and lives his dream, which is worse, they all get to follow their dreams while Izuku just stays behind as a teacher. Not a dig to teachers, and he is teaching in UA, which means his intellect was recognized and nurtured so new generations can learn and be better from him. But the fact only Aizawa seems to see that Izuku is lonely because at one point he was too is just sad for me. To me the ending was just that, an ending that did nothing but piss and depresses a lot of people, me included. With that out of the way, I am giving you all your due. The next chapter of Hack 2, a year in the making, and I'm evil because many asked me if I was cancelling this, and this is my answer for them. I hope you all enjoy. Also added something sorely needed, some lore for Izuku's new powers, like in Destiny 2. Great, now I remember what happened with Bungie and I am depressed again. Still, enjoy and review. See you on the end notes. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter 10, Revengeance, Part 1, 3 days before the assault. Melissa looked at the line of code that ran over the screen, then looked to the right at another screen, and frowned at the same line of code she had. I need a break, she muttered as she pushed herself away from the screen, the chair's small wheels allowing this as Melissa closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She knew in hindsight that what Uncle Might had asked her was not a small task, especially when she had so much going on. But from a certain perspective, she was doing okay. That was until she looked at her right just minutes ago and realized she had been transcribing a line of code. The same line of code that her S-Watch used to activate her seeker mines. Easily an hour and a half of work to the bin due to a mistake. Granted, this line of code was necessary, but it invited trouble because it could be used as a backdoor to break into the security systems, and that was worse than actually not implementing any kind of defense or half-assing everything. Knock knock. A small smile formed on her lips as her actual distraction came. Come in, she called, seeing how Izuku entered the room, 2 notebooks under his right arm, and 2 bags of chips on the other while he held a soda bottle on his left hand. Got the snacks, he said with a small smile. I got my mug, she said as she reached for her desk and pulled a mug that resembled the skull of a Terminator, an actual Terminator, red eyes and all. I knew I was forgetting something, Izuku muttered as he placed the items on the desk. I am not going to see you drink soda from Uncle Might's mug. I am offended. Izuku said as he held a hand to his chest. It's not a hero mug, it's a game mug, oh really? She asked with a smile, crossing her arms. What does it say? I paused my game to be here. Melissa flipped him for that cheeky remark as he went back to his room for his mug, letting her along and sigh as she went to the desk to save her work and concentrate on this. A viable combat strategy against All For One. She wasn't joking when she suggested that she and Izuku were among the very few people in the world that might be able to go toe-to-toe against the Demon Lord, for whole different reasons. One for All gave her an insane edge, and its security countermeasures ensured that AFO was unable to steal it unless Melissa would it so, and she wouldn't. Izuku was another matter. She was certain because of the amount of powers he had, his quirk had been buried under them. If AFO wanted to get hacks, he would have to first wobble through several powers that could not be taken in a simple matter. All For One would have to try what Toga did, which might end up blowing in his face, or cause Izuku to go thermonuclear and kill everyone in a paracausal explosion of video laced with shouts and crystal weapons. At this point her friend is the closest thing they have to a nuclear warhead with a personality matrix, which is weird. Hey Melissa-san, this time another voice intruded in her thoughts. Looking at the entrance of the tinkering room, she spotted Okuko. Was that Izuku-kun I just saw run past? Yep. Gonna help me with some quirk work I got. Hopefully, it will get my head away from this mess. Melissa pointed to her workstation, copied a line of code and messed everything up. Okuko seemed to relax a little at that. Maybe you should rest instead of adding more issues. Okuko began. Daddy said that a pillow is a great companion, she added with a small smile. Yeah, but I can't do that. Don't have that luxury. Izuku and I have to catch up with you guys, the Islander pointed out to a slowly blinking Okuko. Catch up? Have you seen what Izuku-kun can do? Or what you can do? Melissa raised an eyebrow at her. Izuku had his quirk for a year, and most of what he does is based on what he gained. It wasn't until he came here that he began to catch up. Same for me. I am mimicking a lot of things from Uncle Might. Honestly, I am surprised I haven't got a catchphrase yet, because that would be cringe considering I am pretty much a battlemaid, Melissa muttered. Really? Catching up? Again, Okuko asked. We spend up to 10 to 12 years of our lives without quirks. Do you have any idea how hard it is to manage mine without causing one of my limbs to go off in a shower of blood? If it weren't for Sivir, I would be a regular at Recovery Girls. As for Izuku, Hacks instinctually regulates most of what he has, but again 10 years without any form of training, and both of us tend to go the deep end. We don't know our limits, Melissa reasoned. Yeah, Okuko was well aware of her limits before her quirk mutated. The first time she went past it had not been a good time for her, or the floor, or her shoes. Why she puked rainbows was still a mystery she was unwilling to find out. I'm back. Oh hi Okuko-chan. Melissa raised an eyebrow at the interaction of Izuku. Hi Izuku-kun. Another eyebrow rose when Okuko answered, and then they both disappeared beyond her hairline when Okuko leaned and kissed Izuku on the cheek. Excuse me, but what? Both teens stopped at her voice, eyes wide, and zeroed in on her. When did this happen? How did this happen? The girl asked with some mirth, seeing their caught expressions. Our Izuku moved robotically, cheeks red and leaking solar light as Okuko had begun floating, curling herself to a ball and squealing, quite a sight considering that Okuko towered over both of them or anyone in the class. Don't worry, Melissa said as she saw Okuko float about the room, like an oversized balloon. I won't tell, but I expect brides, she said with a smirk. What kind of brides? Izuku muttered, slowly closing the door behind him. Unlimited access to yours and Okuko's quirks. Studies without complaints about them, chocolate, and access to your time without Okuko whining about cutting her time with you in exchange for not telling Mina, Melissa said simply. I should drop on top of you for that, Okuko muttered as she steered herself on Izuku and actually began to lower herself and then began to orbit around him until he decided to catch her between his arms, which in hindsight was quite a sight considering Okuko's overall body. Look, I'm giving you leeway with your boyfriend, Melissa began. And I'm letting you both in my workshop. Last time I let a pair in my workshop, they desecrated my desk and keyboard, and honestly everything, the blonde said with a haunted look. Also was the day this idiot decided to grow dark matter nodes all over his nervous system. Hey, it worked. It hurt, but it worked, Izuku argued with a pout. Don't, Melissa began with a pointed finger. Even start. Are you still mad about the MK tournament? I won fair and square. Fair my ass. You spammed moves, you cheap jerk. The Doom Guy's helmet should be mine. Okuko giggled at the interaction, reminding her that these two were more like siblings than anything else and she had nothing to worry about. Besides, Melissa could not hug Izuku and instantly smother his head between her boobs. Only she could do that, and without the need to bring Izuku to his knees. She also has yet to do that because she is self-conscious and she's afraid she might do what the troop did not, kill Izuku. Anyway, Melissa said loudly, I want to get a look at your quirk Okako, Melissa continued. Your quirk evolved from a simple buoyance denier to a full gravity manipulation. It has always been, Okako began. Both Izuku and Melissa shook their heads. Nope. Denying gravity's pull as you did before would have shot objects to the sky because the Earth is moving at an insane speed and rotating at an insane one too, yet every object you touched floated at a certain level. You at the very least denied the gravitational pull the Earth has on that object and ensured it remained anchored to something to prevent it flying to space. In this case, you Melissa theorized. But what you do now is truly gravitational manipulation, Izuku continued. You manipulate gravitons, a theoretical particle in quantum gravity theories based on quantum mechanics. It explains why you could feel when I used dark matter to manipulate mass because I am indirectly interacting with gravitons. It also explained why you felt strongly when I used solar light. It is a derivation of energies generated by quantum forces. Like quantum gravity, Okako blinked and blinked some more. Sometimes she forgot that Melissa came from an island that was made to study quirks and how they affect the world around them, and her boyfriend had spent nearly all his life studying and dissecting quirks in such a manner that allowed him to see how they worked by a first glance. Then, what about the mist villain of the USJ? Izuku-kun, and I could feel him use his quirk. That isn't based on quantum forces, right? No. Displacement of mass and the creation of a crude but effective wormhole. His body is mist because he needs it to. He uses it to create the portal of point A and point B by bypassing every obstacle possible, but that leaves a mark within the very gravitational fabric. Like with black holes, Melissa explained. Yeah, they have such strong gravity wells that they bend time and light around them, including the spot where they are, Okako added, making the duo nod. That's why, I can feel it when he uses it. Same with Izuku-kun, exactly. And this might help us in the long run, Melissa added. The troop's teleporting tech must be working an even cruder version of the mist villain's quirk, but depends heavily on coordinates and energy. The reason why neither of you can feel it happen, by all reason Okako, should feel it happen the very first nanosecond it begins, but she doesn't, Melissa explained. Where are you leading with this? Okako wondered. The troop has access to an unblockable teleporting technology. Technically speaking, all teleporting tech is unblockable by name alone. Physical barriers don't work. But you can ensure you're prepared the second they come around, Melissa said. I know UA is using a suppression and detection system that would allow them to detect any anomaly and attack the point of insertion instantly. But the problem is that is aimed at land incursions, not air incursions, a glaring flaw in UA's defenses, Melissa reasoned. A single second might be the difference between a successful evacuation and reinforcement of the area to a complete slaughter. Izuku said somberly. The Metal Gears taught us that, he added with a dark look. Okay then. Where I come in, Okako asked, looking at her boyfriend in worry. First I would need to study your quirk in-depth, Melissa began, reaching for her desk and pulling something out of a drawer, then tossing it to Okako, who caught it, seeing much to her surprise a watch just like Melissa's. That S-watch is going to constantly monitor your vitals and whenever you use your quirk. Then transmit the data to my computer for study, Melissa continued, then looking at Izuku. For Izuku I first need him to re-unlock his arc light which fused with his biotics. I don't expect you to go and do it now. Okako's data will do nice, but it would be nice to have a comparison between the two and see where it can be improved, Melissa said with a sigh, making both teens look at her oddly. It? Izuku asked. Yeah. It, Melissa muttered. Uncle Might and Nedzu asked me if I could draw new defense systems to UA, especially with the sudden attacks of the troop and this league bypassing what is to be believed the gold standard of defenses in hero academies across the world, Melissa stated. Covering air incursions and teleporters are on top of the order due to, well, you know, that's kinda too much if you ask me, Okako said with a pout. And unfair, you already have a lot on your plate. Yeah, well, I am not doing this alone, Melissa said. All I am gathering is data. Data I will send to the support courses so they can do the work. You're right, it's too much for a single person, Melissa said simply. But still I do have one job that requires my oversight. A copy of the SHD network control systems. UA needs one, bad, Melissa added seconds later, making Izuku go eye-wide. Melissa-san, are you sure? Isn't the SHD network an island secret? It is. That's why I am making one that just coordinates, nothing else. UA needs this, Melissa said simply. The USJ should have not happened. Being a system apart made it easy for the villains to break in and for no one to know until Izuku broke into the control room. That's a flaw that could have us killed, or anyone for that matter, Izuku wanted to argue. He knew that Island took their secrecy very seriously. It was no joke whatsoever. If they caught wind of Melissa doing these things could get ugly. Hell, the fact that T-dolls were once a prototype project of Island on robotics that the troop stole and therefore earned them the eternal animosity of everyone on the island spoke volumes of it. The fact that All Might and Nedzu asked her to do this also spoke volumes of how they saw the threat the troop and the League represented. He understood the troop as a menace, and after entering Toga's mind he realized that this League of Villains was playing the long game and whoever was their benefactor had all the time in the world to plan for any kind of scenario. Also, the reason I'm going to help Melissa-san with her quirk is to get it under control, Izuku said, helping Okako down his arms and onto her feet. She already told me, no Siva, and her arms might be hamburger meat. Melissa made a face at Okako's words as she saw Izuku place his mug near the desk. The little traitor was a gaming mug, one shaped like a Super Mario green pipe. Cute, but she was expecting something with letters. Not only that, Melissa said. Aizawa is right. Siva is a crutch when trying to control energy hoarder, she began. I need to learn to do it from my own and free Siva to other functions, like my dermal armor and maybe some hacking options. I do have a pretty advanced OS inside me, she said with some smugness. Izuku simply rolled his eyes while Okako giggled. Laugh it up you two, but don't come crying to me when someone hacks your phones and I can fight back with just my brain. My Siva-enhanced brain, Melissa grinned as she threw Jazz hands to emphasize the point. Now Okako was sputtering giggles as she walked towards the door. Okay then, I'll leave you to be, she said while leaning to Izuku and placing a kiss on his cheek, making him blush. Mina wanted to talk about something, so she asked the rest of the girls to come to her room. I'll tell her you're unavailable. Melissa nodded a thanks to Okako. Fill me up when you're done. I am still going to look at your quirk. Payment. Okako rolled her eyes but nodded nonetheless as she walked to the door and exited the room, closing the door behind her. It wasn't even a full 5 seconds before she found Yuga in the living room seated, looking at the horizon, again with that troubled look that had become a trademark of him. If she was being honest, it troubled her. Before, Yuga had been more animated, joyful. However, he seemed stuck in a slump that he seemed unable to get out of, whatever had landed him in that slump in the first place. Yuga-ku and Okako greeted, going to the fridge and opening it, intending on pulling something to drink. She hoped Aidia hadn't drunk all the orange juice or there would be hell to pay. Do you trust him? Yuga suddenly spoke, making Okako stop reaching for the carton of juice in the fridge. Excuse me, Okako asked. Monsieur Midoriya, do you trust him? He asked again. Okako closed the fridge door, eyes narrowed as she saw Yuga still staring at the horizon. What are you talking about? She wondered. 2 times we have been attacked. He has been in the epicenter, Yuga said, somewhat detached and without that flamboyance and small French accent she, and by default, everyone had associated him with. It was clinical. It was unnerving. Still, she had to defend her man. True, he could defend himself, but still it was the principle of the matter. Placing her hands on her waist, she glanced at Yuga, who was still looking at the horizon. You do realize he has been targeted before, right? The first time it was all of Japan. We all were targets, and the USJ was the villains trying to get at All Might, not Izuku and Okako snapped. Yet they went after him. At least that's how it might look, OUI. Yuga said suddenly. A quirk suddenly developing and the troop hot on his tail makes you think. Okako bristled at that. Not that Yuga noted, but she calmed herself after a second. This required a cooler mindset and not start yelling like crazy. Are you really suggesting what I think you are? I am, Yuga said, finally turning to look at Okako. When you think about it, it makes sense, non, he wondered. Madness, that is what it is, Okako said simply. He got kidnapped. He and his mother. Then there is Era-chan, his adopted sister. Also his father who worked on Island. Melissa-san can confirm that. He isn't an experiment, Okako reminded. There are people with power, Uraraka-san, Yuga said simply. With so much power that they can create a story from scratch, Yuga uttered. With so much power that they can spare some to someone, or if they feel in the mood, make someone from scratch, Yuga said, eyes narrowed at her. Midoriya is a lot of things, Yuga said. But honest ain't one of them. He knows why the troop came after him. Why the villains attacked that day in particular. He said as he stood up from the sofa and began to walk towards the elevator. If I were you, I would start questioning him seriously, because friends don't keep secrets from one another. Non, he said as he stepped into the elevator, doors closing as he disappeared out of view. Okiko, for her part, looked at where Yuga had left, eyes narrowed. Something about that conversation didn't sit right with her. It felt too forced. Like trying to force an idea into her, something that wasn't, but wanted to be. She'll have to talk about this with Izuku and the girls, especially Mina. The pink girl tended to have her fingers on the pulse of the class mood, and especially with Yuga being how he was now, she might give her some insight into what he wanted to say tonight. She decided to leave the living room without the juice she had been seeking. She took the stairs instead of the elevator to get to Mina's room. The door to Mina's door was already open, Mina leaning to the frame, expecting her. Melissa-san can't come. She and Izuku-kun are working on something together. Okiko instantly stopped Mina from saying something, if the mischievous look on her face was anything to go by. And no, it's nothing salacious. Izuku's too pure for anything like that, and Melissa's Melissa. Too pure, she says, Gyro muttered from inside the room. But I still remember the time he ripped a Bo's spine with his bare hands, his pure with human interactions. With Bo's his usual is rip and tear, Okiko stated as she closed the door behind her, seeing Toru already in the room, cuddling a pink rabbit doll, a troubled look on her face. So Okiko began. Might want to fill me in why you called us all here, Okiko said, leaning to a wall where Tsuyu was leaning as well. Their Mina's overall look changed. It was the kind of change that made Okiko tense. If there was constance, there would be Izuku's selflessness and Mina's carefree energy. Seeing either change to something they aren't meant to have made her queasy. Mina's tail flicked about, nervously, wrapping itself around her. Girls, we have a traitor, Mina said seriously, making everyone but Toru blink at her. I beg your pardon. Momo asked softly, a small look of disbelief and betrayal on her face. Yeah, Toru muttered. The USJ was an inside job. That is how they were able to be there and separate us so easily. Why the security failed. Why Midoriya was sent specifically to a zone with people that hated him, Toru added with a frown, multicolored hair flickering into different spectrums of colors, showing annoyance. Okiko remained silent for a whole second, then she bristled, turning to the door. Okiko, no. Mina called. Okiko, yes, so said the girl, snapped angrily. That a smuncher bastard. He said that Izuku-kun was an experiment of the troupe. He was trying to trick me, she snarled. Look, Mina began, getting in the way of Okiko and the door. I get it. I wasn't happy either. I was considering punching him in the throat for the bullshit that was the USJ, but then I told myself, we can use him, Mina said, making Okiko blink at her. Use him? Momo wondered. Yeah, Toru began. Think about it, Yaro Momo. He must have some way to communicate with the League. That means if we can tap it, we can know when he is up to something and be ready for it, Toru cheerfully replied, although her smile was a tad feral. Why to ghost him instead of, beat him up, Gyro wondered. And let Principal Nedzu in the know, because we are just students. Our top priority is to get better, not ghost Aoyama before he decides to stab us in the back. Again, because then he gets to do it again and we get caught again with our pants down, Mina replied with a frown to Jiru. Look, I get it, my time in the USJ wasn't any better than any of yours. The less said about Midoriya's time considering his quirk got messed up the better, Mina replied. But that was what we are trying to avoid. It will happen again. With All Might as our teacher, it's bound to happen, especially if he's the main target, Mina reasoned. Not to mention we had the goal of fighting back. They will not forgive that quickly. So I say we make sure we are ready when the other shoe drops. It drops on a pike we put in. Toru's dark look said it all. She wasn't happy with what she had learned and was in full vengeful mode. Sigh. Okay, Momo breathed as she rubbed the bridge of her nose. But we need a more solid plan than bug AMI's room and phone and then somehow tell everyone we are getting attacked without drawing attention to us, Momo replied simply. Why we don't go to Nagant-san, Tsuyu pipped in. She is obviously in the school as a way to enhance security, and probably Principal Nedzu told her that the school might be infiltrated, so us telling her we know who is behind it all or suspect about it would get her on our side if things go south, Tsuyu reasoned, and to an extent she was right. I saw Midoriya-san talk with her when training concluded, Toru said. I think Midoriya-san might suspect the presence of a traitor, otherwise we would be looking for someone to replace Aoyama. Toru said simply, making everyone in the room nod in understanding. Izuku usually tended to act rationally. But the events of the USJ and the fact someone in the class had outright sold them to the villains and was willing to see them dead for whatever reason would overwrite any rational thought Izuku might had, and he would default into the one true method he knew on how to deal with problems. Vaporization. Okiko and everyone else had seen beforehand how far he could take things if someone threatened people he cared about. The Colosseum was an example of this. Now that she was his girlfriend, well, it could get ugly, fast. Okay, we get Tsutsuma-san on our side. Tell her what we know, Anne. Then wait, Momo replied simply, a small rubber ball in her hand which she was squishing. Yet Tsuyu began. We know the who, we don't know the why. Tsuyu wondered, and Okako was with her. Why? Why do this? It made no sense. Their Toru's face darkened. Does it matter? He stabbed us in the back. We trusted him, she said, eyes shining with promise of pain. Besides, he brought Yuiko along. Little bitch, and I have some unfinished business. Okay, Toru-chan, down with the bloodlust. This class can only have one cinnamon roll that goes nuclear, and Midoriya has that spot already, Mina said with a small smile, while one arm hugging Toru. To everyone else, it was obvious what Mina was trying to do. Diffuse the situation and calm Toru down. With a sigh, the prismatic girl started to calm down, leaning to Mina's body, looking for comfort. Why? She suddenly asked, seeing the girls wonder the same, in their own way. Why? Why he did do this to them? Why ruin it all for some crusty villain? Target confirmed. Male with red hair and a hooked nose. Sharp teeth and violet eyes, average built. Confirmed. That's her all right. This is the third face she changes this day. Think she knows. On an apartment on Hosu, a small team of police officers had set up a small surveillance outpost, meaning every inch of the room was covered in either computers, listening devices, or fast food for the team. Negative. It has been standard for her to do this every day. Continue surveillance, you 2-inch, yes. So two voices echoed on his headset as the cop in question sighed and took the headset from his head and placed it around his neck. God help me, who send us those two. They weren't even informed of the situation. We could have lost her, he asked another cop in the room. They are from Tokyo, sir. They had to outsource due to our losses during the attack. Are we that stretched thin? He wondered. From what I heard, the Musutafu Police Department is no longer fucking around. Criminal they catch they beat to within an inch of his or her life, just to ensure they are out of the streets an extra month or two. And don't get me started with the Yokohama department, the superior blinked, actually now thinking over several stories he had heard about the excesses several departments had been taking after the troop assault months ago. Before the attacks, there had always been a schism between the police force and heroes, mostly because heroes were dealing with issues the police should be dealing with. That of course stemmed from the fact that the police, while a law-enforcing force, didn't have the same privileges that heroes did, like free usage of quirks, better pay, and better publicity than the police. Of course that changed when the troop attacked. Countrywide, the police lost over 40% of their overall forces, with departments in several cities outright decimated by the attack, and having to depend on civilians to cover up several holes in security and surveillance. There were several kobans across Japan that sat empty and others entirely staffed by the community because they simply lacked the manpower to staff them. Other changes were that the police were working closer with heroes. Before, they worked with them with gritted teeth. No one wanted to admit it, but the police had always been envious of the freedom heroes enjoyed while they had to be tied with a lot of regulations on how they operated. Now, however, they had to work together because there was no other choice, and it opened the eyes of several officers in how ignorant they were in some matters regarding heroes. Like how the heroes were very thankful they had extra support because their worst nightmare was being alone in a fight with no support in sight. Or how most of their earned money tended to go to whatever damaged property they did, which tended to cost more than they made. Or how many think being a hero is easy, but is, in fact, a harrowing task, and the only people who can understand them are those who have equally harrowing tasks like medics, firefighters, and the police. While the attack had caused a tragedy, it brought some people closer and made them understand each other better. This led to a joint operation that before the attacks would have been full of chaff between the heroes and police, but now was going smoothly because they understood better and knew the stakes of the operation. Everyone knew about Izuku Midoriya and how the troop failed again and again to kill him. They also knew that during the USJ attack, he encountered someone who matched him somewhat. A shapeshifter with multiple quirks, one sent to kill Stain, takes his face and use so said face to attract more villains to their side. How UA was able to even get this information didn't matter. What mattered was stopping those two. Stain already had a cell in Tartarus waiting for him for all the hero deaths he caused and the civilians he condemned with so said deaths. As for the girl, well, either captured or not, the idea was to prevent her to even get close to Stain, ensure she fails. Make them believe there is a rat among them. It was almost poetic to make these villains believe that someone betrayed them when in reality it was UA who was making them dance like trained monkeys. It also went against everything he knew and did. They should capture her, and ensure that doesn't become a bigger danger than she is known. Considering she went toe-to-toe against the kid that made the troop his bitch, well, the dangers were there. Was this what undercover cops had to deal with when they infiltrated a gang and had to weather the tide of corruption and evil just to ensure to get them all? Sure felt like it. Thankfully, it was just about to end. A deadline that the League had placed to start the whole thing was approaching, fast. The girl had found Stain or had found his trail and was hot on it. The League was counting on her causing a loud mess to draw attention to her and not to whatever they were doing. Whatever they were doing had also the attention of the military, who was planning an ambush to deal with them ASAP. It would look overkill if it weren't for the fact that those ass blasters had attacked hero students intending to kill them. After the shit the troop pulled, all bets were off. Fuck around and find out. And this League of Villains was about to find out in the worst way possible. A small beep on a nearby laptop made him frown, putting on his headphones once more, and tapping the keyboard to accept the call. This better be important, he called. Stain is around. We have visual confirmation. Bastard is stalking Native. For a moment he allowed himself a small smirk, just as expected. UA wasn't the only organization that could make villains dance to their tune. Is Native made aware of it? A minute ago. He says he's ready, but we have Toga as an unknown, inform Mako and Yoroi. If all goes according to plan, we will have an ending to this by past tomorrow. But keep an eye on Stain. He has shown already his unpredictable. If he makes a move on Native ahead of time, intercept and detain. Damn that bitch in the League's plans, he commanded with steel on his voice. Understood, but Nedzu ain't gonna like it. They want the backer of the League, and I want a Ferrari. Life's full of disappointments. That's just 1 inch. With that he ended the call and focused on the images that he was being fed by the several agents who were working undercover to keep an eye on the disguised Himiko Toga and Stain potential targets. Native's appearance on Hosu wasn't a causality, they put him there. Stain was so obsessed with killing heroes he considered unworthy that all they had to do was to put one on his line of sight. Native wasn't a bad hero, far from it, towing the line between Limelight hero and Underground due to his very unique quirk and skill set. The thing was how he dressed and his hero name, that had gotten him a lot of flack from the so-called internet crusaders and keyboard warriors that were too little soft to even realize why he dressed like that or why his hero name was Native. But that was fine. That was fine. Stain was like them too touchy, too emotional. They already had confirmation that Native had become his target, and therefore would drag Toga along the way because she wanted Stain's life. If all went according to plan, then in 3 days they will be locking Stain in Tartarus, causing internal strife within this League and one step closer to dismantling it before they cause more chaos. Of course, as all things in life, no plan survives first contact. Nothing goes as expected. Morning, UA. The first thing that should have tipped Yuga that something was off was when Mina stopped trying to make him socialize during breakfast and lunch. Now that kinda is his fault if he was being honest. The stress of being, well, AFO's spy had gotten to him, so much he decided that it was easier to do what he does by simply keeping at arm's length, easier to not worry about the implications of what he has done and will be done when there is no attachments. If only he knew how this behavior had already marked him in the eyes of others. Of course, he was too preoccupied with things as they were to even wonder what was going on. The guys were, okay, they weren't doing anything that might jeopardize him, other than Midoriya being the engine of chaos he is and slowly recovering his strength. Yesterday he swears he saw his hands glow purple, but overall they were being, well, boys. The girls, well, they decided they needed to keep their distance from him, which was fine. He had enough problems and wanted to add girl issues to the volatile mix that was his life. He didn't want to wonder why they decided to do this. Of course, because of this he never saw Tsuyu talking with their new teacher, the scary lady with an antimaterial rifle for an elbow. He should have seen it, but being left alone as he wondered how he could survive being a spy did wonders to his depth perception. After lunch, well, things got strange because Aizawa-sensei was waiting in the classroom. What he said should have ringed his alarms and told him that he should be extra careful with everything he owned and did. It didn't. Tomorrow we begin a special training session. The thing is that the rat decided that it would begin at 5 sharp. Aizawa began. Of the afternoon, right? Mineta would wonder. Of the morning there were a lot of groans from the students. A curse of Bakugo and Melissa and Izuku looked like they wanted to yeet Nedzu to the sun. Not the best idea, I admit, Aizawa began. But according to the rat, this is to prepare you all for work at unnatural hours. Heroes get a clock in, never a clock out. That made sense, in a way. As a result, Today's lesson on heroics will be cut short to a single one so you all can get some extra rest, and you can pick your hero suits because this will be a big training session that will last at least 3 days, that caught everyone off guard. How big? Momo wondered. School big, first, second and third years of all courses are mandated to participate. Now that was novel. Usually, second and third years tended not to interact with other years. That didn't work with the support department because they all share one brain, tools, and workforce. Furthermore, Izuku continued, due to the nature of the exercise itself, you all will be required to work with other departments. This is for each department to understand the nature of the other department and what function they fill and therefore end hostilities with one another. Okay, Yuga wasn't expecting that, and honestly, it threw a wrench on his plan, which was pretty much at this point ostracize Midoriya, in all but title because he had not a good plan aside from trying to egg Uraraka away Midoriya, which so far hasn't worked. So today we will have a review of laws to finish the day. Your costume cases will be left in the lobby of the dorms so you don't need to seek them in the support department, and you can review your equipment. Izuku began. I recommend you all go to bed early and have a small care package ready to eat during this training. It will be hard, I assure you, the teacher promised as he turned to the board and began to review last week's law class. It would be 2 hours later, and back in their dorm, that it would all sink to Yuga, seeing how the class was making a small care package of food for each other, to have something to eat during this training, which they assumed going to drain them heavily, so they were filling canteens with ludicrous amount of water, or in Aidia's case, orange juice. Yuga simply waited until everyone was done in the kitchen. When they were done and were working back in their dorms, some in groups, Yuga began to work on his care package. Somehow, for some reason, he felt empty. Homework is hard, Eri whined, looking at the notebook with the so often mentioned work she had to do, and a plate of apple slices she had forgotten to eat them. Welcome to my world, Miko muttered as she looked at her math homework as it offended her on a personal level. At least I understand this, I think. Oh, you forgot to carry the 0-inch, Eri moaned in discomfort as she looked at her homework and pouted, seeing that her sister was right. Miko murmured, seeing that she made a mistake in her work, and tossed her pencil to the notebook. Samade-san, make this look easy, she muttered as she reached for one of the apple slices, took it and ate it without Eri even realizing it. The little girl simply hummed, really wanting to get over this thing that now she had to do too. On the sides, Inko just smiled as she saw the plight of her daughters and how they struggled with the homework in front of them, just like Izuku did at one point and how she did at one point and Hisoshi did at one point. Honestly, this part of normality calmed her nerves, all things considered. An hour ago she got a call from Izuku, telling her of a training that they would incur and would pretty much mean that he might miss some calls to her and the family. She wouldn't have been concerned if it wasn't for Mitsuki calling her minutes after that, telling her that Katsuki told her the same, in his unique way mind you, but it seemed that he was turning early after checking his gear because their training would last 3 days and would be painful. Pain was not something she wished on her son, especially after last year's madness. But pain lay in the road to heroism, it paved the way and painted the bricks. It was in the bones of heroes, their blood, their souls. Of course, Izuku had told her something Katsuki hadn't told Mitsuki. To be careful, that the troop was just the tip of the iceberg. That the USJ was just the prelude of something much, much worse. That was why she was watching Eri and Miko, a gun hidden in her if something or someone dared to even lay a finger on them. She made a mistake by not having her gun on her when Stain attacked Magma Dragoon. She won't make that same mistake again. Next day, 4:08 in the morning, UA. Mina was a morning person, as shocking as it might be to some people. To many, Mina was the kind of girl to cocoon herself in her mattress and sleep past her waking hours because she was lazy. Today was not that day. She had been up and about at 4 sharp, washed and cleaned by 4:15, and in the living room, her hero costume in case and line with the others while she ate breakfast at 4:20. She wasn't the only one. Nearly everyone was awake and ready for the training they were about to do. 3 days that would test them all together. They knew that the first day would be the hardest, so they prepared accordingly. Extra food in bentos, water, and juice in several bottles, and change of clothes just because they feel like it. By 4:40, Yuga was the last person to arrive in the living room and eat his breakfast. As usual, he looked out of it. 10 minutes later they were all ready. Not even a second later Izuku was inside the dorms, looking somewhat rested, which in itself was a miracle considering his line of work. You're all ready. Good. Let's go, we are waiting on Gym 1-inch. Izuku would never admit it out loud, but using the one gym with no special designation other than 1, and was used for quirkless workouts in the entire school as a cover entrance for their newest training ground. Bunker was a stroke of genius. He just wished the newest training ground Bunker didn't have such a traumatic event attached to his class, or that his class developed PTSD while inside it. The lights around the campus road are on, so guiding the kids to the gym wasn't that bad. Well, if it isn't 1A, then came Minomaran. I swear to God, if you start shit, I will personally feed you your dick. Okay, shouted just learned Jiru isn't a morning person. Good to know. 5 minutes later, and 2 classes of teens that were restless later, they reached the Unamusing Gym 1. The gym for quirkless training, and just as he expected, the place was half full, but slowly getting fuller as the entirety of UA filled in. You're all here. Good, Nedzu replied after 5 honest minutes of waiting. Today's training session will be a 3-day session that will allow us to gauge your skills in a different terrain than usual, he began. As you are all aware, most combat scenarios are indoors, and with current day events unfolding before us, I assume that will continue. To that end, Nedzu continued, reaching for a controller and pressing a button in it. We decided to give you a stress course. The floor suddenly jumped, making every student tense up, just before they all felt the sudden drop in their stomachs as they descended. However, as actions by outside parties continue, we realized some of you are not fully prepared, and with the ever-present threat of an attack, we decided to do something special. The descent ended and Class 1A, sans Melissa, tensed up. Welcome to training grounds, Zeta, Nedzu stated, much to the shock of everyone at the entrance. Izuku nearly had a heart attack there and there, half expecting that some form of bow would appear and attack them. He wasn't alone, of course, on that line of thought. Please follow the yellow lights on the walls to the lockers. Hero course you can change there. Everyone else you can put your personal belongings and cell phones off. There is no signal here. Some students looked somewhat mollified but accepted this. After the fiasco of the USJ, all levels of paranoia were accepted. Cell phones off was just a small one in the large scheme of things, to be fair. Locker rooms. The locker rooms were massive, easily fitting all 3 hero courses. Of course, they were separated by sex because obviously, they didn't have the mental maturity to see their female counterparts but naked and not lose it, and their female counterparts didn't have the mental maturity to not try and take a speeding start into a butt smack on one of their male counterparts. After all, they are all fit as fiddles, no hero is out of shape. Yet the somewhat jovial environment one would expect of the locker rooms was replaced by the most serious tone that the male portion of 1A was exhibiting. Most of the third years didn't know why, of course, but suspected it as something that happened during Hashima. Training ground Zeta is like a troop base, so it stood to reason. They were triggered and taking this really seriously. Monoma had to be restrained from his usual shenanigans once they saw Izuku pull a freaking pistol and checking it with a serious look on his face while changing, not to mention the arsenal that sat at the bench at his side, checking for any flaws. The less said about Bakugu growling while checking his grenade gauntlets the better, or Kaminari looking exceptionally serious and testing a new collapsible baton made out of iron that looked like a tuning fork and a substation transformer had a child. The only one who looked like didn't want to bite everyone's head off was Aiyama. He looked shifty and tense, not the same way as the rest but still. The first to leave the room is Sen, not wanting to be close to what seemed to be their sister class about to commit homicide because someone else opened their damned mouths. He almost instantly crossed paths with Kendo, who kept glancing at the girls' locker room on the other end of the hallway. Let me guess, the 1A girls look ready to murder. Kendo nodded with a grave look. This place. Yaro Orozu-san told me this was a troop base, Sen blinked. The one that crashed on Hashima, the same one where 1A got whisked away during the attacks, Kendo replied. Shit. No wonder Midoriya had all his weapons out. He's not going to be caught a third time. Kendo nodded at his logic, considering that Midoriya seemed to have a more than personal vendetta against the troop, and likewise the troop against Midoriya. Can someone, Shinsu said, actually exiting the locker room and giving a glance. Tell me why Midoriya looks like he wants to torch the place up and why Aidia wants to help him. Sen and Kendo gave each other a look. Troop base, they said at the same time. Excuse me, but what? Meeting room or formally hangar. The objective of this 3-day-long training is as thus Nedzu, or at least a screen displaying his image to the assembled students, began as so said students looked on. Operations like kidnappings, raids, or rescue efforts tend to be a long and tedious experience, one that tests the patience of many, hero, villain, or civilian. Nedzu continued. With the ongoing threat of the troop and new villain groups rising to take the chance of the chaos, most heroes are now facing raids and rescue efforts that extend to days. Most would crack at the extended duration of said operations, something we don't have the luxury of doing. Nedzu added. Right now you're all being divided into two several teams. One will play the part of the heroes responding to a specific scenario, the other will be the villain either in defense or taking advantage of a rescue scenario. It might look like the very first hero versus villain scenario or first-year practice, but I assure you it is not. Nedzu clarified. Both teams will have several tasks at hand, not only capture either team. This will be treated as a real scenario, with real consequences. Hostages, biohazards, explosives, foreign operatives, even media entering into the operation and mucking it up, Nedzu said simply, making everyone actually blink, even the third years. The teams will be formed from all classes, first, second, and third years of all classes. This is a hands-on deck scenario. You will all learn from others and improve, Nedzu added. Of course, there will be rest, but assume you won't have any rest or sleep, so work with your teammates to have some there. Nedzu got a malicious gleam on his eyes, making everyone gulp. Hero classes will have access to the entirety of their gear. The support department will have a lab on ready to work on what they need and repair what they brought in. Management will have unlimited access to communications and visuals, and normal course will have access to whatever they ask. Within reason, now everyone was nodding with a small smile. One more thing. This entire exercise will be recorded for future viewing, of both the staff and heroes alike. So plus ultra and no pressure. With that, Nedzu's image disappeared from the screen, now instead displaying several names. Team 1. From Class 1A Izuku Midoriya. From Class 1B Togaru Kamariki. From Class 1C Tsutsutaka Agaramato. From Class 1H Maina Furisu. From Class 2A Morata Fua. From Class 3B Oda Hebi. The images of the first team formed made some look at the gathered team who actually looked at the pictures in display as they seeked one another and then closed to one another. See you on the other side, Izuku whispered said to Okako as he parted ways, soon as the second team was already being formed. Control room. Please call Midoriya-san, Nedzu began, looking at Erase ahead. We need him to track Toga and Gadget, see when the attacks will take place and if they are going to cinch their movements. The Erasure hero nodded, already reaching for an earpiece to communicate with his student. On the side, Kaina kept a steady glance at the screens, especially one focused on AEMR itself. I want AEMR paired with one of the girls in his class, Kendo-san, and Hado-san, she said simply, slightly glancing around and gauging the reaction of her fellow teachers at her words. Do you think he's the one? Khan asked, eyes nervously glancing at an image of one of his students. The girls of 1A seemed to be in concert on this. An attitude shift so jarring that clued Eshido-san and Hagakyu-san. Two mid to low students but with outstanding social skills. They seem to think he has a hand in the USJ break-in, at the very least on how the villains got the records for that day, Kaina said. Besides, his sudden nervous streak around Midoriya-san matches up with someone deadly afraid of being found out, she added. Because Midoriya-san's current MO of dealing with issues that threaten him and everyone around him is sudden vaporization. Nemurai said in a deadpan tone. Yeah, I would be scared shitless too. Doesn't explain the why. If he is the mole, Ainin shook her head, getting ready for her part in the operation and defense of UA itself. Considering that he already fought with arguably the league's strongest member and walked away with nothing but cuts and a messed quirk to show, I would be afraid too. Yuga realistically has nothing to fight back against Midoriya-san if he finds out and makes it his life goal to reduce him to atoms, Ainin replied, reaching for a desk and her domed helmet. Kaina nodded, looking to the side, seeing All Might skinny and with his suit hanging like extra saggy skin. It was a jarring image to be sure, even more so with that serious look on his sunken eyes. It is more considering his sponsor, she added with a frown. The stories about All for One and his methods to achieve loyalty were one of the first things she learned when she was given the task of putting a bullet between his eyes. She was stupid enough to think that this entire thing was Yuga repaying a favor to the Demon Lord for. Oh God, she risked a look at the skinny All Might and he actually nodded at her gravely. The brat was quirkless, she uttered. The silence that fell in the room was something to behold. It would explain why he required that specialized belt before the gas attacks, Recovery Girl muttered, hand on her chin. It all lines up with stories regarding quirkless individuals gaining quirks, like Melissa-san and One for All. Jesus on a pogo, Knuckleduster muttered. We had the answers all this time and we never saw them, he muttered. Of fucking course. He gives quirks of several generations back. Back when they were notoriously hard to manage or didn't get the safeties they were bred with. Fuck me, that's why there was so much collateral when a fight happened. It wasn't because they were bad with their quirks, the quirks simply were too dangerous to use in any way, like naval laser present MIC suggested. Which means the gas fixed it and pretty much aligned it with the current standard, he reminded darkly. Okay, Midnight suddenly butted in. We can discuss this at another time. Like when Midoriya isn't getting here or we are holding a live exercise and ensuring the bombs the League is going to drop on us never happened, Midnight reminded everyone. Principal, did you warn the other schools? He nodded. We are waiting for Midoriya-san for a final confirmation. He just arrived. The door to the command opened with a hiss, letting Izuku in, who looked at the room with critical eyes. Not that anyone could tell with his mask on. Young Midoriya, All Might spoke. Mind taking your mask off? It is kind of unnerving, he said. The teachers all saw Midoriya visibly sigh as he did, letting them see a pout while doing so. It is that unnerving. Kid Gran Torino began. With that thing on you seems like looking for a sacrifice. Izuku pouted more, making Kaina chuckle. With those ears of his pout made him adorable. Like a rabbito, of course he is part rabbit, now she must control herself and don't pinch his cheeks. In any case, Nedzu inferred. We require Strand once more. If you would. Nedzu asked, making Izuku blink, then somewhat smile. Sure, didn't have time to meditate, could use it, he said as he sat cross-legged on the floor and closed his eyes. It was the first time any of the teachers were ever present when Izuku tapped into Strand and the ones tied to Gadget and Toga, but it was quite a sight considering that 5 seconds after closing his eyes, Izuku's hair seemed to come to life and gain several extensions that glowed and pulsed with energy, a sound akin to balloons being rubbed together echoing in the room. That is ominous, Snipe muttered, stroking the handle of his gun in comfort. Half expect to him rise speaking in Babylonian at any moment, Midnight chuckled. Babylonian? That's oddly specific, Zip it, Snipe muttered, seeing, just like the rest, how the glow died out after some seconds, and Izuku opened his eyes. I lost Gadget's Strand today, but I was able to glean they are planning to attack, at night. Toga has Stain tagged, but is too entrenched to move at dawn. They are waiting for her to attack Stain during his hunt at night to launch the attacks on the schools mind you. Gadget confirmed it. I was afraid of this, Nedzu muttered. Good thing I was able to warn the other academies about this and they have their countermeasures, but still, the chimera muttered, looking then at Izuku in the eyes. At night you say? Izuku nodded. Toga confirmed it. Stain plans to lure Native into an alleyway, at night, while no one is watching. The moment the attack happens, she will send a signal to the League, who will then send the bombs, drop them most likely to bypass the sensors, at an hour where everyone can see, Izuku reasoned, hand on his chin. Indeed. I assumed the bombs are to ensure us and the police are focused on other matters rather than the base and Hosu, Nedzu replied. Kid Gran Torino suddenly butted in. Did the old fucker speak? He asked. Izuku grimaced, knowing who Gran Torino was referring to. No, but he was present. Even with the fraying link I could sense him through Gadget. He was observing the whole thing, not saying anything as Shigaraki continued hammering down the plan, Izuku stated. Odd, Gran said, eyeing everyone in the room. If you want my opinion, this feels more like a learning exercise for Shigaraki than anything else, Izuku mentioned. There are too many holes in this plan, too many what ifs. He's counting on luck for this to work out. He's counting on Toga to kill someone who has so far survived a hunt led by Endeavor. The man can be many things, sloppy ain't one of them. And if Stain has made it this far with the number 2 on his tail, then Toga won't survive this encounter, no matter how many quirks she has, Izuku reminded. True, Yagi said, but still luck plays a factor in all we do, even in this. They are counting on this too, and the fact that All For One is counting on it too means he has an unordinary amount of trust in Shigaraki. I agree with young Midoriya, this feels like a training exercise, training or not, kinda snapped. They are launching a 2-pronged attack and using tank shells as distractions against schools. I say we raise the stakes, and see if we can get more heroes on Hosu. Capturing Stain would help, disabling Toga would be greater, no, Nedzu stated, making Kaina and Izuku blink. We need them to think they have the upper hand. For that to happen, they must be able to launch their attacks, all of them. After that, it doesn't matter, they will be too knee-deep to pull out, too blind to realize the trap, Nedzu summarized. Kaina-san, contact the other academies, and tell them to synchronize with us, and 13 Kaina huffed but nodded. 13, the roofs are yours for the day, the space hero nodded her head. Yagi, do not transform at all. We need you at full strength when the deadline comes. Yagi looked ready to protest but nodded nonetheless. I thank you, Midoriya-san. Please return to your team. The exercises start in 10 minutes. Pass the word, Izuku nodded, putting his mask back on and walking away. Think it was a wise idea? Kaina asked, seeing on one of the screens how Izuku walked away, not telling him about the AMR kid. He's determined, and honestly I am afraid of what will happen when he finds out on his own about the situation, she remarked. I agree, Present MIC said, very serious mind you. Little listener is eager. But he is also volatile, he won't take it well, the news I mean. AMR was with them during Hashima, that was true. He might have not melted someone if it had been someone from 1B or other classes Midnight supplied. But this one of their own, who bled with them, cried with them. This kind of betrayal is unforgivable. We might have to make a plan to extract AMR if we confirm his betrayal before Midoriya or the girls do, she added with a sour look. The girls are already circling AMR. That's why I wanted him with any girls in his class. We need him monitored, especially now that he knows about this, kinda added, motioning everything around them. By the way, she uttered, looking at Nedzu, how you got this into UA without no one noticing? Nedzu there just smirked with all teeth. Okay, got it. Not asking, moving on, kinda muttered as the automated selection finally ended. Now everyone was separated into teams. Power loader, activate the bots. Initiate home alone protocol, Nedzu said, making kinda smirk. This was a devious plan to make the villains think there were still students inside the UA main building. With communications down, the only means of communication to the outside world were the very room they were in. Recovery girl, the hospital is yours, the aged healer nodded, walking away as two cyber ninjas in white flanked her, another means to reduce her workload even more. Nedzu had heard about the marionettes and how they had been twisted by the troupe to be the now-feared Terminator dolls, so it was high time to twist their technology back. Each one of the bots in white had detailed knowledge of human anatomy, mutated or otherwise, and could perform even complex surgeries if required. They would serve Recovery Girl well. Snipe, kinda. It's time, both gun-based quirk users nodded, seeing one of the screens how a door hissed open, and instantly a dozen Fulgor unites began emerging from it. While it was for security purposes, he had no illusion that 3 days cooped down here wouldn't make the teens act rashly and tempers flare. The Fulgors had another function. For Snipe, who would organize the rescue exercises, they would act as extra muscle for the villain teams and a way to record everything from a first-person view perspective. For Kaina, it was another way to keep eyes on Yuga. Nedzu was almost sure Yuga was the traitor. Everything just lined up perfectly, and so far there was no indication that All for One knew that they knew about his little surprise, or that they had one of their waiting. Evolution finally caught up with the Demon Lord because being blindsided the way he was going to be today was going to be precious to look at. Granted, there was no way to be prepared for evolution to grant someone the ability to harness game superpowers and suddenly be able to break the laws of everything. Well, Nedzu expected it at one point. He was glad it happened for their favor and not the villains. Seeing on the screens how the teams began to divide with one another, Nedzu turned to Hound Dog. I trust this will help you observe every student without issues. Hound Dog nodded, staring at every screen that had focused one of the teams, truly a work of art in terms of surveillance. Nedzu looked about at this control room, a project of his, something to replace Kilo Airport and other places the HPSC used as nerve centers in case of disasters. Too visible, too vulnerable. This base, once belonging to the troupe and the site of a massacre and coordination of some of their sickest plans on Japan, would be the first. A way to slowly but surely ensure security not only for the students but for everyone. A nerve center is hidden underground that could become a bunker so civilians could hide. A bunker with all the amenities of a hospital and military base, kitchens, and everything needed for survival in dire times. So far the other schools were on the fence about this plan of his. But honestly, this plan of his was something he had made out after the gas attacks. Nedzu was afraid. He had seen the signs the moment the attacks occurred. Chaos was slowly forming, villains were solidifying their forces and slowly but surely becoming more dangerous than before, and old problems were surfacing to cause more problems. The slow shift of the HPSC to the WHA was going to be a period that outside actors would see as a weakness. Chaos would follow and his students would be tested because, of course, they would, because if Yuga was truly the traitor, the one behind the leak of the USJ schedule, then All for One had him on his grip. One single word of the Demon Lord and Yuga could leak the location of the class at any given time. All for One and his student would target 1A due to their connection with All Might and their defiance. No matter how you wanted to paint it, they had become targets and pawns in a bigger game. Nedzu would make sure they would make it to the end of the board, despite what others might try. Anastasia glanced at the latest information that poured from Japan. Eyes narrowed at several tips of information that her informants there provided. They are stocking up, she thought with a grimace. The change of the HPSC to a WHA administration is just step one of a shakedown. Eyes narrowing, she spied a small line in the report that made her gulp in somewhat fear. Nedzu was seen entering and leaving Tartarus. 2 days later, a prisoner was leaving Tartarus with Snipe and Eraserhead as an escort. That alone drove the point that Japan was preparing for something. Considering what went down last year, it wasn't out of the realm of possibility, and honestly, she would be disappointed if they didn't do something to mitigate another attack of the troop or the very least ensure another doesn't occur. What struck her odd was the sudden military buildup in all parts. True Japan was troop-free up until several weeks ago after the USJ attack, so it stood to reason that maybe they were building up their military forces to a possible second incursion of the troop, but one would have to be very naive to think the troop would try something like that. But to assume is to presume, and to presume is to invite problems. Japan hasn't done either. They were still reeling from the gas attacks and the loss of an entire generation of children. Statistics showed that Japan was going to have a really bad time in the next 10 to 15 years, even with the survivors of the decimated generation, mostly those aged 14 to 15. It didn't hide the fact that they would have to bear the load of a disaster for several years beyond adulthood, perhaps even more. Some in the office speculated that several of those aiming to be heroes would be in the profession past the usual retirement age, which tended to be 40 years. Surely not following All Might's footsteps, but rather because there was no choice, because the pool of candidates got decimated and they would have to cover up the loss with the manpower they didn't have. Meaning that most hero hopefuls that graduate in the next 3 years will have to continue past the retirement age, at least 10 to 20 extra years. And that included active heroes at the moment. Now use that logic for everything else. There wasn't any exaggeration when said Japan was going to have a bad time. If they were going to suffer on heroics, so would in politics, medical fields, security, and everyday life. Simply put, it could end a nation's ability to self-sustain a productive workforce that could replace the old one. That kinda explained why they were building up forces. The gas attacks were a disaster of a caliber never seen before. Another attack that can cause the leveling of a city, or even a district of one, would be catastrophic on so many levels that it wasn't funny. A simulation done to mimic the same attack, but on American soil, showed how effective and dangerous the gas attack had been. Suffice it to say that anti-troop operations across the states had ramped up due to this sole simulation and the perceived aftermath now visible in Japan. They might look fine, but they are anything but fine. A small sound on her computer made her pause, seeing a notification for a video chat from Solomon, their president at the moment and someone she could trust, someone not compromised by the troop. Sighing, she accepted the video call. Solomon, there had better be a good reason for a call at this hour, she muttered. There is Anastasia. I just received an emergency notification from your agency. I think you got it too. See page 67 of the daily package. The man, who looked like a humanoid shark, spoke with a serious tone. Raising an eyebrow, she did as told, skimming over the document she should have seen already, but with so much going she barely had time to even go to the bathroom without taking documents to read with her. When she laid eyes on the first paragraph, her blood ran cold. Is this real? She asked. FBI and CIA agree. Trojan is a failure on Island and here, but Pandora seems to be in the final stages in Europe, and Legacy, according to many sources, is completed in Asia and being deployed as we speak. Solomon spoke with a grim tone. Jesus, she muttered. Despite the obscurity regarding the 3 projects the troop had, one could infer what they meant by their names alone. One of our agents in Berlin worked with MI5 and intercepted a troop agent. The documentation they found is troubling. Solomon began. Pandora seems to be an entire operation centered on causing a rift in the European bloc. Cause the members of the European Union to infight, as in actual armed fights between sovereign nations. Anastasia shook her head. Hardly something that hasn't been done since humanity has been around. Solomon. What's so bad about this one? She wondered, and she had a point. Bad enough it could spark a war among the European bloc. That stopped any train of thought that she had at the moment. I beg your pardon, she said slowly, blinking owlishly. But did you say war? Yes, Solomon spoke. Solomon argued. And I'm not exaggerating. I got a brief look on that and it's bad. It's blackmail to the next level, almost like gaslighting, but not. The thing is, it's all true. The information they have, I mean. Somehow the troop got a hold of very sensitive data. Things that could start World War III here if anyone finds out. Jesus. Anastasia's reply was all she could utter. She knew Solomon wasn't fond of joking. This was him being the most serious he could bear. That's not all. Oh really? she muttered. It seems they are aiming to make Hummerize their proxy on this, of fucking course. She threw her hands in the air. The technocratic terrorists using the fundamentalist terrorists cult, why not, she wondered. It lines up with some activity we have been seeing the past month in branches of Hummerize in Europe. We still don't know where their main base is, right? Not a clue. We have it narrowed down to Spain, England, or Othian, and we are discounting Othian due to location, too far off compared to Spain or England and too mountainous for movement. Anastasia, however, shook her head. I think we shouldn't. We don't know where they began, but we know where his founder was born. In Othian, yes, but operating there has been difficult, and the possibility of a troop base, never mind a joint troop. Hummerize operation has a lot of people here in Washington restless. That I understand, Anastasia hummed, thinking of what could be done. Okay, first off, what can be done with this possible data leak? Can it be stopped? At this stage, no, only mitigated. Ensure that only selected data can be released that doesn't trigger a war among nations as the only solution, and only if we act now. She nodded at his logic. This late into the game, they were lucky they learned of this and not after the fact, as many times before. Very well, I am sure the intelligence agencies there are aware of the plot. They are, and they are pooling their resources as we speak. They are understandably spooked by a possible war breaking out and Hummerize taking advantage of the chaos. Then send in Alpha Squad. They are our most experienced team. They help there and ensure to find and eliminate troop and Hummerize high-ranked operatives there, Anastasia suggested. Solomon nodded, but he had a worried look on him. Is something the matter, Solomon? Yes, he admitted. So far we haven't heard a peep from them in months. Then the USJ occurs in Japan. So far they haven't admitted it was them who orchestrated the attack, or even admitted they orchestrated the gas attacks in Japan on their usual channels. It strikes me as odd an organization this petty and proud wouldn't be patting themselves on the back after such attacks. There he had a point. Anastasia admitted to herself, all that had been happening so far in Japan was heavily irregular. I also reached for some contacts in the underground. One of them in Italy told me that his old outfit got contacted by him. Anastasia didn't know why, but she felt dread. Him. The Kappa, the fuck, she muttered, now full horror settling in. Didn't All Might terminate the fuck? Seems to me the Kappa is more resilient than expected. I've read the after reports. All Might admitted to caving the guy's skull in, brain matter all over the floor. The guy is dead, and if he survived, he is working with less brain power. You can't just put a brain together after getting mushed. You just don't, she declared in panic. Well, he did survive. My associate told me that he somehow reached surviving elements of the mafia in Italy and expected them to comply with his commands. When they didn't, well, one of the surviving families is currently smeared all over the walls of their home, children including fuck, so the stories of the Kappa being a degenerate murderer weren't stories at all. It seems he is calling in all favors he is owed. Resources, front companies, the whole 9 yards. There are also the ones who attacked Japan. They weren't the troop. Anastasia had the delicacy to look somewhat miffed. Of fucking course we got more issues, more terrorists. You don't get it. Whoever led the Japan attacks was troop, who had access to their resources, but was not with them. It splintered off the main group. We are dealing with a maverick. That was not good. Not good at all. The troop. You could profile and get a reading of their overall operations and actions. Same with Hummerize and to an extent with AFO. All of them maniacs with delusions of godhood and power-hungry, would scale a ladder of corpses if needed and wouldn't even bat an eyelash at this. But a new player. One with the resources of the wait. Anastasia's eyes widened. Solomon's words now rang with far more strength than before. Especially when you began to connect dots that were unconnected before. The Colosseum raid, she whispered, now all making sense. Raxus. The attack on Japan. The conflicting orders found by her agents in those raided bases before and after the attack on the country. Why the Asian branch of the troop had been silent all this time compared to the American and European branches. She knew the specifics of the Colosseum raid. She knew the actors. The question was who among the actors against the heroes had the power to orchestrate such a move, to literally take the troop from the troop, to command their resources. One with a vendetta against Japan, no. Against a singular actor that developed during the Colosseum raid. One that was carried out during the Raxus bombing and the gas attacks on Japan. And she knew to who the attacks were aimed to. Midoriya, she uttered with some trepidation, realizing that things had gotten dangerous. Because now she knew the motivations of this unknown actor, but not the actor in question. Solomon, she began. Have Alpha Squad go to Europe and assist in this suppression effort by the agencies there. Frame it as us honoring old friendships. The man knew what she meant by this, and nodded at her logic. Then again, it was not just cloak and dagger. Beta and Omega squads will deal with the troop here. Beta is already fit for combat and Omega squad is still wet between the ears. I think some would-be warlords and cartels being erased from the South American map would do them good and ensure security in our borders. No, he nodded at her logic. That would leave Sigma squad. They are still in the process of acclimation. I have plans for them, but you're right, they are not ready. I'll have just to trust the Japanese can keep the chaos from spilling out of their island before we can deploy Sigma squad and whatever countermeasures Sam is working on, Anastasia admitted. So, no shade network. Anastasia shook her head. I overstepped and caused Melissa to withdraw in panic. I am sure at this moment she has already warned her father about my break-in into her encryptions and I-Island is working on reinforcing theirs. The Shade Network and therefore their creators are out of our hands now, she admitted with some hesitation. We'll have to make do with whatever Sam makes. Good or bad, I'll have to suffice and buy us time while we create better defenses, she added. Ah, a Hail Mary then, sad as it sounds. Yes. And with the threat of the Kappa hanging over everyone, including the troop and this new actor, not to mention Hummerize, we will have to be very careful on who we trust. I will have every single quirkless person on the payroll screened. We cannot have a repeat of the gas attacks here or moles of Hummerize here. I will not allow it. Bakugu counted 5 hours. 5 hours since this training exercise began, and by all that was holy it was madness. And he loved it. To the left. To the fucking left. Bakugu screamed to his teammate the Sasquatch from 1B. I am well aware, you Philistine. Jutora Shishida reminded, raising his arm to block 2 of Pony's horns, all while his bulk covered the 1H student who was deploying a turret, of all things. How the hell do they have a turret? Denki exclaimed as he suddenly let out a thunderbolt that made Bakugu take several steps back before he could nail Pony. Oh, that, the 1H student, a girl with pink dreadlocks, said in almost an uninterested manner. That's nothing, she said, suddenly cackling as she reached for something in her backpack and pulled it out. Check this baby out. Jesus on a pogo, that's my Doria's 4th horseman. Denki exclaimed, seeing how my Hatsune cackled loudly as she aimed the 4-barrel, full-auto shotgun and leveled it at Jutora. Oh, his is an inferior product. This is the real deal. She then pressed the trigger. Immediately 4 lobs of yellowish substance were fired from the gun, hitting Jutora and coating his fur and body with what seemed to be glue. Oh dear, Pony muttered, suddenly jumping away and Spartan kicking Bakugu, who blocked her hoofed kick with his gauntlets. Jutora's gonna be mad sure enough. Jutora let out a growl, looking at Mai. Very well. Violence it is then, and with a mighty roar he flexed his body, this one expanding as his fur simply exploded outwards, cleaning away the gunk he had been fired upon. Jutora smashed The Jutora Shishida. Original quirk, Beast. Mutated quirk, Dr. Jutora and Mr. Beast. Jutora's original quirk was in short a transformation type, increasing his size, strength, agility, and resistance at the expense of his mental faculties, truly turning him into a beast. The gas as usual changed most of his quirk operated. Jutora can now change into 2 forms, his original beast form, without the impediments that originally ailed it, like diminishing mental faculties, thus ensuring maximum combat capabilities. He calls this form Dr. Jutora as he keeps in mind. However, if the need arises, he can access a stronger form. By shedding his fur and pretty much growing even more in size, he becomes this Hulk-like being called Mr. Beast. In this form, Jutora is nigh unstoppable, but he can keep the transformation for 30 seconds and his mind devolves into a more primal state before returning to his normal form and having to wait for half an hour for his fur to grow back. A clear sign that despite the gas cranking up both bodies to support better the evolved quirks, there is a limit. Jutora let out a roar that made Mai gulp in shock as she took several steps back as the massive hairless beast of a man launched at her. Oh hell no. Denki snarled, a ball of pure electricity formed already on his hands. Eat this up, he snarled, launching the electroball at the charging Jutora, never noticing that Bakugu was near the impact zone. Zap! Until he did. Until everyone did. Bakugu barely had time to even scream as several jolts of electricity hit him, and he stopped. He quieted. Ah, Bakugu? Denki asked, concerned he might have overdone it, considering that Jutora had been stopped, or stalled somewhat. Instead, Bakugu's eyes snapped angrily at Denki, fully red while his horns now elongated and hair became shaggier, a snarl of pure animalistic rage forming on his face. Oh, shit, Pony muttered, seeing how Bakugu simply exploded and covered the entire distance between them, a screaming Denki's head in one hand while Pony and Mai screamed as the feral student rushed at them, POOWWEER. A powerful fist stopped Bakugu's charge, right in the solar plexus, killing momentum and releasing Denki from his grip. Senpai. I got a question, Denki muttered. Yes, my kohai. Mirio Tugata said with an easygoing grin. WHY now, he screamed. We waited for you for 5 minutes. Apologies, he said, seeing Bakugu stand, or better said roll over into a combat stance, snarling angrily. But I had to deal with my third-year counterpart and the objective. Which is complete, now to incapacitate. The third year and member of the Big Three declared firmly, all the while Bakugu let out a scream of anger and rushed at the Mirio with renewed focus and anger. Him Midnight muttered. It looks like electric jolts seemed to trigger a berserk episode on Bakugu-kun, she summarized to Snipe and Hound Dog. Great. The walking bomb can't get jolted. Next, you gonna tell me water's wet, Snipe snarked, seeing another screen of another team fighting it off. That is concerning. Seems to be a defensive mechanism of some sort, Recovery Girl stated, or a hologram of her stated, looking at the same images Midnight was seeing with a critical eye, probably triggered by some byproduct of vestigial aspects of his original quirk and whatever mutation that gave him those horns. It means he got to insulate that suit for electric shocks. Write it down, Majima-kun. Power Lotus simply rolled his eyes under his helmet as he tapped another annotation on his tablet and observed Mai pull another device from her backpack, which seemed to be bottomless. This summer set of metallic bowlers she launched at Jutora and snagged him instantly. Hatsume made some impressive leaps and bounds. Nothing has exploded as of yet. Snipe asked. Nope. Thank God, Majima muttered. The only reason they haven't is that she is looking for guinea pigs to test them. Last I checked she was checking Midoriya and Aidia. Poor bastards, he said with a grin. You're going to throw them under the bus, without a second hesitation, if it means making sure that Mai stops blowing shit up. We have enough with Bakugu-san to add one more, he answered Midnight. Careful. Midoriya is pretty much S.H.I.E.L.D.'s personal assistant. She might think Mai's poaching. Power tools might come out. Power saws and plasma torches, Snipe snarked, seeing how Mirio was able to knock Bakugu down, but not before quite literally treating his head like his own personal punching bag. I'm glad Bakugu-san's skull is reinforced, or I would be looking at a concussion and benching him for the rest of the exercise, Recovery Girl called out. I'm sending the bots to pick him up. Seems he will be my first serious work this day. All things considered, a blessing. Don't count your eggs just yet. Midoriya's up, Hound Dog added with a small growl of anticipation. And so is AMR. Okay, Itsuka said, looking at her team. From 1A she had AMI and Ashido. She had a second-year student from General Studies who could make clones from air, which was cool, and they were sentient, but they were short-lived. 5 minutes lived. The third-year hero study, Nejaya Hado, was hyper to say the least, but the way the other third-years looked at their team, with dread, indicated she was more dangerous than being an engine of positivity. Their techie was a second year as well, just made out a shield that deploys into a wall that can stop a speeding truck, and somehow his quirk makes him solidify cardboard into freaking diamond hardness while he holds it in his hands. Overall, a balanced team with experience and power. So far they haven't done much, just warming up. Now they would do something. If AMR could keep it together. Would you stop? Mina said simply, adjusting her mask slightly. You're making me nervous, she added as her tail flicked about, all while Nejaya looked at it, mesmerized, like a cat. Anyway, Kendo stated, our objective is twofold, capture and rescue, she began. A group of villains have captured a VIP and several bystanders. Our objective is rescue. The villains are secondary until rescue is completed. The exercise ends with the successful rescue and capture of at least half of the villain team or the death of the hostages. We have at least 15 seconds after a villain spots us inside the edifice. She pointed to a building that was in fact a prop designed to look like a normal room, to rescue the VIP and the civilians, otherwise they start executing them. We have 5 minutes to finish this. Kendo took control. AMR, you're with me, we will hit them first. Frontal assault. We are the distraction. Ashido, Onamuri, you're the rescue team. Enter when we have their attention. Hado dash, Nejaya-chan, that's my hero name. Itsuka sighed. Nejaya-chan, you and Konohamaru will be on mixed duty. Aid us if we get overwhelmed, or aid Ashido if they get discovered. However, if you see Midoriya on the offensive, engage immediately. He's the powerhouse, so it's better to have him occupied. Nejaya nodded, an oddly serious look on her face. 30 seconds. A mech nearby shouted, making them all anxious. Okay, let's do this. Kendo began to hype them all, But Yuga wasn't exactly in the mood but steeled himself. Soon a horn signaled the start of the exercise, and the team broke into their designated pair swoosh, before backing away as walls or ice formed around them, basically boxing them. Welcome. Heroes Yuga bit a curse as they all spotted Izuku marching to them, reaching for the wall, tearing 2 icicles off it, and flipping them on his hands. The hostages are ours. Accept it or they die, he snapped simply. I see no reinforcements, his alone kendo muttered. Looking at Nejaya, the third-year student was a hard counter against Izuku and his lack of experience, but his sheer amount of powers and weapons made him unpredictable, even if nerfed as she had heard. Move or be moved. Mina snapped, tail above her head. Internally she was giddy. She had wanted to say that for so long, despite saying it to Midoriya of all people. Very well, he suddenly hissed, slamming both icicles in front of him, each shot exploding in front of him and enveloping in a thick sheet of ice that began to take form, and Mina gulped. So did Nejaya, and Yuga had nearly a heart attack. In front of them now stood a 15 feet tall monstrosity, blue ice with red outlines that formed a carapace, a large chest where they could see Izuku's outline, all while large arms flexed and displayed wicked-looking talons while the large, digitigrade legs supported the apparent impossible size. A large tail waved about and showed a line of spines that made Mina's own look small, while on the back 2 more, smaller tails moved about. All 3 had pincer-like tips. The head was the most striking of it all. A large, ornate crest like a crown covered a cruel-looking maw with rows of teeth that looked sharp and flanked by 2 large tusks. There were no visible eyes on it, just the assurance Izuku could see them. Okay, this is all hands on deck, Nejaya hissed and Mina agreed, even more as the ice creature let out a roar and charged at them with surprising speed. Yuga screamed as he began to fire his lasers, all of them. Much to his horror, he saw how the carapace took each beam and didn't even chip. On the sidelines, Kamariki looked at the scene of chaos with some fondness. It was nice to see Kendo actually struggle, especially after seeing her in action. Good. She'll grow stronger from this. Crack. Especially as he saw her assume her giant form and start ducking it out with Midoriya's King Frost form. Seeing how some of her teammates rushed past the fight, Izuku just ensured Nejaya stayed behind with a swing of his tail. Good. The plan is going along nicely. That present MIC pointed at the thing that was currently battling Kendo and Nejaya. Is the single most horrifying thing I have ever seen. Midnight nodded, yet the smirk on her lips told another story. Never knew Midoriya-kun had such a sadistic side to him. A finger curled on the corner of her lip as her tongue came out slightly. Such display of cruelty. The sight of his youthful blood burning so hot she cooed. Kinda saw different, especially as the ice creature opened its maw and let out a stream of ice that she knew was stasis and instantly boxed Nejaya from assisting the others that Midoriya had let pass. His controlling the field, she pointed at the moment Itsuka landed a solid blow to the face and one of his back tails shot a beam of ice that made Itsuka shriek as she blocked it with one arm, frost forming on the exposed limb, limiting mobility and making her force her other arm to do double duty. He instantly took the strongest and the leader and ensured they were focused on him and him alone. I think he tried to go at Mina too, but she was prepared. The whole thing is alien and she is a sucker for aliens, Eraserhead stated. Eyes narrowed as several energy blasts from Nejaya met the armored skull of the creature, barely making any dent in it. Nedzu just smiled placidly as he turned to present MIC. How is chat taking it? He asked the teacher, who turned his attention to a separate monitor, one with many names scrolling about. Hero names. Shishido asks when the internships open to send an invitation to Itsuka. Frost wonders what is the current temperature of the ice forming around Midoriya, and over a dozen heroines are aptly terrified of him, but have broken into a discussion over his terrain and mob control over psychological warfare, MIC stated. Nedzu chuckled. The business course might not be on the field with the rest, but they had an important work nonetheless. Record everything happening right now and administer the chat and stream across the Hero Network showed to heroes. They might not be able to host the sports festival, but that doesn't mean he will stun the children's future. This had been an inspired plan made by his predecessor but shot down by the HPSC, but with them out of the way the WHA had green-lighted it. Using the Hero Network and broadcasting the exercise live, without the students knowing a damn thing. The beauty of it was that it used something heroes alone used, the Hero Network, which was secure. For the support class, the work they were doing was being recorded and would be forwarded to selected support corporations across Japan, as said corps wouldn't have access to the HN. The second part was of course unburden the students. At best, they believed they were just training, and not competing for a spot in an internship with a hero. They treated this as training, and as such they were improving themselves without hindering others. Showing them without any pressure of outstanding, letting them shine without trying to maim each other. Granted, that seemed the case now as Izuku and Itsuka grappled while Izuku's tail had coiled on Nejaya, preventing her from escaping as a secondary timer began ticking. 15 seconds before the villains start killing hostages and ending the exercise. The wild pussycats are cursing a storm for not being able to forward an invitation to Midoriya. They say that he will be the 5th cat. Mask be damned, MIC chuckled. Also, it seems that someone forgot to private the chat to just national heroes. I just saw Star and Stripes' name pop up and claim that Melissa will be interning with her alongside the cultist Nedzu cackled. They didn't forget he let it happen. Show everyone that Japan was taking action to fight the troop and villains with renewed vigor, showing the new generation, the new, improved generation testing their mettle against one another was the first step. He was more than aware that leaks might occur. Melissa did mention that her mother had broken the firewalls of her phone, and as a result, she could do the same with one of Island and therefore UA cybersecurity. He would be a fool to assume she wouldn't try it again if she was desperate enough for whatever reason. This was also a message to the troop if by chance they were watching. Izuku Midoriya wasn't the only one they should worry about now. Their little experiment ended up arming Japan and giving them a terrible resolve to end them. As far as they were concerned, the world was not big enough for them to hide. 7:30 p.m. I am beat. Mina moaned as she collapsed on a futon, her body slowly rotating about to face the ceiling and get rid of her boots. Not far from her, a hero was rubbing his wrists, sitting on his futon, just like her, just like the rest of the class. The base was massive, but not big enough to ensure boys and girls could be separated. As a result, the classes were sharing rooms. For the first years, this was an experience. Mineta would have been on cloud 9 for sharing the room with girls if it wasn't for the fact he was too tired to think. The training today had been brutal, so he was on the futon, his bowl-shaped diaper garma on the side alongside a small flak vest his father was able to procure for him and the support class had fixed up better. Also, the room had cameras, so no one would get ideas of doing something naughty, and even if they wanted to they were just too tired. Even the seemingly inexhaustible Izuku was resting, although he had a notebook out and writing on it. Right behind him Okako was using his head as a headrest for her head, her eyes lost and tired. "Is that head comfortable?" Xiaoto asked innocently, shedding his arm braces and belt, being only dressed in his one-piece, baggy jumpsuit. "His hair is so fluffy. It's like a cloud, but like when you imagined what clouds felt before you realized they were just wet air," was Okako's answer as she adjusted her weight to not bother her boyfriend. Not that anyone there but Melissa knew that. "I'm gonna try it at one point," Toru muttered, eyes lazily following Ojiro's fluffy tail. "But now I am just tired," she added. Her leotard sported some scuffs on, but the multicolored cloth hasn't shown real damage to stop functioning. Her boots and gloves were at the side. "Also," Mina said, turning around and giving Izuku a dirty look. "You scared the hell out of me, mister," she accused, transforming into that. "I thought you only could turn into a rabbit." "I didn't transform. I just made a coat of stasis armor around me," Izuku defended himself. "I needed a way to harness stasis again after the USJ, and this was how I did it. Just like I did with Sola and my Sunshine Glaive." Mina just rolled her eyes. "You turned into a 15-feet king xenomorph on ice," she deadpanned, making Momo snort a laugh at the image. "I nearly pissed myself and I think Kendo-chan won't sleep after seeing that," she added. "On the other hand, that was fucking amazing." Language. Aidia tried to get up from his futon. All he could was sit upright and wave his hands robotically, making many snort a laugh. "How bad was the damage that Loon did to you?" Melissa asked, fiddling with something on her S-watch. "I know you lost your supers, but your new super has smoke in it. What happened?" Izuku seemed to mull it over, sighing afterward. "It's bad. The light had to fuse with several of my conduit powers to continue existing. Remember that light is form, darkness is memory. To remain they latched onto smoke, neon, my biotics, and cryomancy. Had to meditate to regain my solar light, to give it a form, and it was exhausting." Izuku sighed as he let some stasis matter form on his hand, vapor forming on the small shard. "Darkness is memory, so I didn't need to meditate, but I will have to train a lot to even be close to what I was before. My King Frost Super is not even at its fullest form." "Bullshit." Mina cried. "You breathed ice and held Nejaya-chan down alongside Kendo-chan, and I swear I saw you shoot ice beams from your tentacles." Surprise element, Bakugu hissed from the side. "It won't work next time." "Deku's right. He's gonna bust his ass to be at the top of his game again, and I expect the same of every single one of you. I can't transform into an alien fake moaned with a grin on his lips. Bakugu just shook his head. Not that you moron. You and I and everyone in this place knows it, feels it, he hissed, red eyes narrowing dangerously. We will be alone for a while, trying to keep the country from falling apart. Deku here is the closest we will ever get to whatever those nutjobs have in storage, so it's obvious they will sick us at him to test us, to see if we are ready for surprises. My brother in Christ, Denki began. He turned into an ice alien using space magic. He deadpanned, making everyone laugh at that while Bakugu just scowled, but found himself unable to argue with Denki. Not because he had an answer already, but because he saw how the class was worried. Worried for Deku, and if he was honest, so was he. He was, after all, their strongest hitter, and he was crippled. Yet he was adapting, evolving, making those strange powers he gained his own. Fucking finally, if he was honest. Moving to his futon, he didn't miss the look French fries were giving Deku, one of resigned scorn. That was odd. Deku didn't exactly try to be mean to Frenchie. On the contrary, he tried to be friendly with everyone, and Bakugu figured that was Deku's flaw. He tried to see the good in everyone, and only the most horrible acts would make him think differently of others. The reason why the troop was on Deku's shit list was as they had made things that defied logic and shouldn't exist. That alone made them dangerous in Deku's eyes and had to be eliminated before they could cause more damage. Which was good, but still didn't answer the question of why Frenchie there looked offended and resigned. As if he expected Deku to be left weak, unless. Nah. Or maybe, nah. He does note that Deku had suddenly started meditating, that weird green thing now covering part of his hair and making round cheeks take some steps back and laying in her futon. What are you up to, you nerd? Bakugu muttered, not aware that one of the cameras was focused on Izuku and Izuku alone. Himiko stalked her prey with practiced ease, just like Jackal taught her. It helped she could meld with the wall she was clinging to like a human-sized chameleon. Night had fallen on Hosu, and as usual, the place felt more alive at night than at day for some reason. Maybe because the place has a lot of night entertainment, and it wasn't just the love hotels and bars that seemed to dot every corner. Jackal had told her that some cities just become alive when night falls. Not even All for One could explain it. It just happened, a thing that only humans make happen. But right now she was more focused on the sight of Native. As usual, the hero was on night patrol. The guy was a mishmash of both Limelight hero and underground. He was known for hunting villains, like actually hunting them like animals, following footsteps, blood trails, dens, even when they take a piss. The guy was terrifying in that regard, and he didn't use a quirk for that. All he needed was something to follow, and he would find his prey. Jackal called Native an impressive hunter, but one with tunnel vision. He never knew when he was being hunted or stalked. Not that many tried to do so, but when the man was in the zone, little could break his concentration, and that was what Himiko was counting on. And he had found Mr. Stain. To be fair, so had she, but because she had been tailing Native, and Jackal had been right. Native had been hunting Stain, who had been hunting Native, and Native hadn't even noticed. Even better, Jackal had been right too about Mr. Stain. He hadn't noticed her too. Once he zeroed in on Native, he forgot all about keeping a low profile. Maybe if she was smart, she could get Native's blood too. Maybe his body too. Dr. Garaki might be a hoot and a touch crazy, but he got her all that blood and in so many flavors, and he had never rejected a body to work on. Could frame it as a birthday present. AFO might find it funny. For a cryptid, the guy was a total troll. Shaking those thoughts aside, she sees how Stain keeps stalking Native, eventually reaching a narrow alleyway. It is there where Stain springs his trap, and she has to marvel how attuned heroes are to respond to distress calls. The single, recorded plea for help reaches Native, and it makes him turn to the alley automatically. It makes her wonder how many times Stain has used this same trick and how he discovered it. Native is already in the alley, and she sees Stain's form above, overseeing it all. It's time. She decloaks and pulls a flip phone, a burner if Jackal is right, and starts to type to Kurogiri, then sends a message. It takes 3 seconds before 15 portals form around Hosu's skyline and drop a number of Lote Nomus the doctor needs to get rid of. So the heroes will do it for him. Part 1 of the plan is a go. The dark sky doesn't hide the portal that forms above UA grounds. 13 narrows her eyes when she sees it, and so does Yagi, who slowly buffs and reaches for her back, gripping her explosive-resistant suit, made by Power Loader for this one moment. It doesn't look like her usual suit, mostly because her usual suit is made to appease and protect from the elements. Explosions tend to be at the bottom of things she worries about. Explosions are man-made. Nature is scarier in her opinion. She tenses up as she sees it, a large package that slowly pokes out of the portal. Large, she pegs it at least human size, which is already hard to decipher due to how varied human bodies are now, so she pegs it at least All Might size. The moment the device is pushed through the portal and this one closes, she tenses up, a signal for All Might, who tosses her into the air. A silent alarm rings across all channels as soldiers start arming up and preparing. Just seconds ago the green light was given. Hosu was under attack and the bombs were deployed above the major hero academies in Japan, just as Mr. X had predicted, and as he had predicted, they were a mere distraction for the main attraction, the League of Villains coming to the base. Above Hashima Island, 3 forward mobile bases manned with 15 people each get an instant feed of cameras across the underground base as several portals form up and several figures come out. Some of them are the malformed and unnatural Nomu creatures. Thankfully none of them look like the one killed at the USJ, but with each one having multiple quirks they could be as small as a kitten and as deadly as white phosphorus. Be aware hero squads, Alpha, Delta, Gamma, and Iota. Multiple BOW classification Nomu have been spotted in your vicinity, numbers on 1 to 3. Engage with lethal force, a controller said while tapping commands on her console. Hero Team Epsilon, be aware a portal has formed on a room to your right. 2 Nomu have emerged. Hero Team Zeta. Hero Team NU, be aware 3 portals have formed. Multiple Nomus on site. Overseeing it all was a general who looked like a Bishoden, with a perfect jaw, striking blue eyes, and blonde hair slicked to the back. He looked young, but he wasn't. That was his quirk giving him the look of an Adonis. He was over 55 years old and had the experience to command this operation. On the corner of his eye, he spots movement and he narrows his eyes. The main guests are here. Approaching a console, he taps a console, and the earpiece on his ear cracks to life. Omega Squad. Jackal has been spotted. Let the portal die and then send him to his maker. There is a sound of acknowledgement from the other end of the line as he spots other members of the League appear. Good. If all goes according to plan, he will be sending several body bags to the bottom of the ocean with enough explosives in them to ensure no regeneration happens. See if that chucklefuck of AFO likes it. Native slumps to a wall, holding his wounded shoulder, blood pooling out freely as the hero killer licks the blade he used to stab him. Immediately he feels his body seize up. Nothing works as it should. He feels he can talk, but that's about it. He can barely even move his eyes. This is horrible, and now he realizes how Stain was able to rack up so many important kills against highly mobile heroes. All it takes is a cut. Today I end another fake, Stain intones, slowly marching to him. The sudden chaos he hears beyond the alleyway is secondary as Native knows this is going to happen. Well, they weren't, but they assumed correctly. Stain never noticed the many heroes in civilian clothes or the sheer amount of cops with high-caliber guns in them. There is movement on the side as Stain suddenly raises his blade to block Himiko Toga's claws. Sparks fly as both sharp objects grin at one another before Stain and Toga jump away from one another. You, Stain hisses, eyes narrow. Come to save a hero for fame. Nah. Come to take your face off, Toga says with an almost unhinged smile on her lips. It's too much. Native laughs. It is broken, and the effect of the paralysis quirk Stain uses makes it horrible to hear. But he laughs and catches the attention of the 2 villains. Oh, you are so wrong, you 2. Shigaraki doesn't know it, but there is something in the air. Something is wrong. The Nomu at his side doesn't seem to notice or care or know or bang. The Nomu's head is suddenly gone in a shower of blood and gore. Shigaraki instantly dives to the side as a swarm of rounds nearly turns him into minced meat, but his Nomu ain't that lucky as it is torn apart by rounds that ignite flesh and tear bits apart. The FUCK. You 2 think I am trapped. Native's grin is unsettling and makes Stain want to erase it from his face. That is until he hears it. The unmistakable sound of a sword being unsheathed. The girl notices it too as she turns and both look at 2 heroes at the mouth of the alleyway. Yoro Musha and Black Belt are there. Truth of the matter, the power to rend atoms and make bombs obsolete. Ainen was always feared in her high school days because everyone thought she might end up killing someone with her finger alone. She never had many friends, and those she had lasted little against the onslaught of hate and fear many had for her. It wasn't until she had used her quirk to eat a fire that she realized she could do so much more. In all honesty, she had entertained the notion of becoming the monster they labeled her for. Funny how a small fire caused by a pair of kids ended up turning her around into the path of heroism. Sometimes she wished all her high school naysayers could see her become the very opposite. How their words ended up becoming a galvanizing idea in her to keep becoming the best herself she could be. Oh, How she wished she could see their faces as her finger ate over 2 tons of explosives and chemicals strung together, all while the bomb was unable to even ignite, as her quirk even ate the fire that almost ignited it. Not today, assholes. Stain instantly is on his guard, realizing this is a trap. A well-elaborated trap using native. He looks at the laughing hero in shock. I was never trapped in here with you, native hisses. Eyes unusually full of dark mirth. Toga looks up, seeing much to her shock at none other than Mako herself, a feral grin on her face and red eyes shining with barely restrained glee. Not far from the rabbit hero, 2 officers with rifles aimed at her. Shit, Himiko curses. Izuku opens his eyes. A smile on his face as he looks at the camera at the corner. A chuckle escapes his mouth. A signal is given and Nedzu on the other end of the camera smirks with glee. The hell you laughing up, Deku? Bakugo asks with not his usual bite. Oh, nothing. Izuku waves it off with aplomb. Just a joke, I remember, a joke. Denki wonders. If it is so funny, then tell it, he challenges. Izuku just gives Denki a smile, his eyes unusually, sadistically joyful. You wouldn't get it. Toga jumps to the side when Mako crashes into her former position and has to yelp when 2 darts meet her arm and she feels her arm goes slowly numb. Stain rushes to strike at the laughing native, only to hiss in pain when 100 punches meet his body and make him roll to the side, lifting his sword to meet Yoroi Mush's own. You 2 are trapped here with me. The sounds of gunfire, quirk deployment, and dying Nomu fill the usually calm nights of Hosu. Just as planned. Izuku's compendium of powers. Phoenix born, harness the fire, harness the ashes. Become eternal. Super, sunshine glaive. When activated, Izuku emits a powerful wave of fire that burns attacks and turns them into ash for consumption, while at the same time, a glaive of solar light is formed. Wings form at the back for mobility, and in general, he emits an aura that applies radiant on everyone around a radius of 5 meters of him, increasing attack strength. The glaive can be deployed as a defensive measure, creating a wall of fire from the tip that can block nearly all range attacks, and also fire blasts of burning smoke that hones on targets and apply scorch on impact. The blasts are weak by design but can be fired like a machine gun. Also, the glaive can be stabbed on the ground to create a pool of radiance that immediately cures anyone standing in the pool and removes any ailments recently acquired. We are phoenixes. From ashes we are born, to ashes we return. And from the embers, we are born anew. Never fear the fire. Embrace and respect it. Hoarfrost, there is beauty in chaos. There is beauty in control. Sheathe yourself in both and become unstoppable. Super, King Frost. When activated, Izuku coats himself in a thick layer of stasis matter and blue ice that takes the form of a xenomorph king. It becomes Izuku's body until he wills it to power down and acts as a multiplier of strength. King Frost has 3 tails, 2 on the back and 1 main tail that fires stasis beams that instantly coat targets in matter that applies slow on the target, while the form can breathe ice that can be controlled and assume any form Izuku desires. The King Frost carapace is incredibly durable, able to resist all forms of punishment and even extreme heat and energy blasts, all the while the body emits a small mist that coats allies with unperceivable frost armor that activates and negates damage on allies. However, on this form, Izuku can't use grenades and his mobility is greatly hindered, unable to glide or double jump. But can run really, really well for something so big. We are the Chaos Tamers given shape. Our touch is cold. Our will is unyielding. Our form is ferocious. Embrace what you have become and tame the untamable. Chapter end note. So, worth the wait. Hopefully, this will satisfy you all enough. 2 special shoutouts to 2 people who made the impossible possible. One for a review going by the _dragon_mage, who did something I considered madness. Read Hack and Hack 2 and leave a review in each chapter in a month and 10 days. I want you all to applaud this lunatic who gave me some ideas. And if you're reading this, buddy, sorry I didn't answer each review, but I feel this is better, a personal one where everyone realizes the mad lad you are. The second mention is to a writer who decided to tackle the task of making a reaction of Hack. He goes by A Loyal Friend and the name of the fic is viewing the any % speed run. A watching of Hack by HYPN0S. Currently, just 2 chapters because we all know the monumental task he just made himself do with this. So I want you all go and read and leave a like and a review. Encourage him because I feel many good fics die not for lack of inspiration but because sometimes there is simply not enough attention brought to them. Each fic done is a work of love by a community who wants to write stuff, to show their creative chops. So there's that, working on the next chapter, and I hope you like this one. HYPN0S signs off. Peace. This would be all for today. Next part coming soon, so please like, share, and subscribe to get informed as soon as the next part